Chapter 148. On the way back, He Yen kept looking at the basket of flowers in Chu Zhao's hands. The flower basket looked very beautiful. The peddler wrote the two words, Zilan, with extra care. His words were elegant and refined, and when placed together with the various fragrances in the basket, they really brought out the best in each other. "Brother Chu, you must eat it as soon as you get back," He Yen said. "Otherwise, with the weather in Jiang, it will melt very quickly." She had also bought a qilin-shaped one for herself, but she had already finished it. "I've tasted it. It tastes good, and it's not too sweet." Chu Zhao smiled gently. "Thank you, He. I'll be very careful when I get back." He Yen was finally relieved. After they bought the sugar paintings, they walked back along the river bank. When there was nothing to talk about, He Yen occasionally asked Su Zhiheng about his visit. "Brother Chu, how was it when you went back to attend your friend's wedding? Was it very lively?" Chu Zhao was slightly startled, but then he smiled and replied, "Yes, it was very lively. After all, she was General Fei Hong's sister. His Highness the Crown Prince even personally came to congratulate her." He Yen was a little suspicious. His Highness the Crown Prince? Did the Crown Prince come to see Su Zhiheng get married for Su Zhiheng He Rufei, or both? Was the Crown Prince also involved in the conspiracy between the He family and the Su family? Furthermore, did the Crown Prince know her identity? But Chu Zhao sighed again. Perhaps Master Su was deeply in love with his late wife. During the wedding, he even cried. He Yen said, "Huh?" Perhaps her face was full of disbelief, but Chu Zhao didn't know whether to laugh or cry. "What's wrong? You don't believe that there are men in this world who are deeply in love?" He Yen thought to himself. Of course, she believed that there were men in this world who were deeply in love. For example, He Sui, her current father. After Madam He passed away, he raised his two children alone. Lady He was so arrogant and willful. He Sui could spoil the little girl because she looked like his wife. It could be seen that there were people in the world who were deeply in love and had no regrets. But this person could be anyone, and it definitely wouldn't be Su Zhiheng. "It's not that I don't believe him." He Yen concealed the ridicule in his eyes and said, "It's just that if he behaves like this, wouldn't his new wife be angry?" General Fei Hong and the other members of the He family were all deeply moved. So, although it's lively, it's just that this wedding banquet is a little sad. He Yen felt that among the many jokes he had heard this year, Chu Zhao's joke was the funniest. Would the He family be sad for her? If this was said to the pigs in the pigsty, the pigs would feel that their brains had been insulted. But when Chu Zhao talked about this matter, it was obvious that most people thought this way. If he did something bad, then he did it. But after he did it, he put on a sorrowful and pitiful appearance and pretended to be a pitiful person who was rarely affectionate and righteous. It was really disgusting. He doesn't seem to agree with this one's words? Chu Zhao paid attention to her expression. He Yen smiled and said, "It's nothing. I just feel that this old Master Su is very interesting." "What do you mean?" "If he really is deeply in love and can't forget his wife, even if His Majesty personally bestows the marriage, he can still refuse if he wants to. After all, he's a man." He Yen lightly mocked. "If he's a woman, it's normal for her to be unable to decide her own marriage fate. Brother Chu, you've heard of young masters who snatch by force, you've heard of evil tyrants who force women into prostitution, and you've heard of beastly fathers who sell their daughters for glory. But have you ever heard of a woman who does this? From what Brother Chu said just now, that old Master Su is like a weak woman who was forced to get married. That newly married young Mistress Su is like an evil person who forced him to marry her. What does this mean? If he doesn't want to get married, no one can drag him to the wedding hall. If he doesn't want to consummate his marriage, could it be that young Mistress Su can still take him by force? If he still continues to be obsessed with his deceased wife, in the future, what will the new young Mistress Su do? I feel that it's not fair to that person. This friend of Brother Chu's is also a bit hypocritical." She spoke bluntly. He Xining was her younger sister from the same father and mother. Even though she hated the He family, He Xining had never done anything to her. He Yen couldn't love her, nor could he hate her. He could only treat her as a stranger. Any sane person who heard this would only think that Su Zhiheng was the one who was in the wrong. It wasn't enough to destroy one member of the He family. Now, he had to send in another victim. How cold-blooded and ridiculous! Chu Zhao was stunned for a moment. Then, he suddenly smiled and stopped walking. He cupped his hands and said to He Yen, "Is this one narrow-minded? Or is it that Brother He, as a woman, can stand in a woman's shoes and empathize? It's just that no one has ever thought of standing in their shoes. He is very different from ordinary women." He Yen looked at her and asked, "How is he different?" Chu Zhao continued to walk forward. His voice was still very gentle as he said, "Most women, even when faced with this kind of predicament, have long been numb and indifferent. They don't think as much as he does. He is thinking for them right now, but it's very likely that they're enjoying themselves and will blame you for meddling in other people's business." He Yen smiled and said, "Brother Chu's words sound a bit high and mighty." Chu Zhao's smile froze for a moment. "Why do you say that?" The imperial court is a man's imperial court. The major affairs of the world are the major affairs of the world. Even when it comes to reading books and going to the battlefield, it's also men who have a unique style. The world praises men as heroes, but at most, they praise women as beauties. It's really unreasonable. Men have taken advantage of the world, but in turn, they blame women for being numb and not wanting to make progress. If this isn't high and mighty, then what is it? Brother Chu thinks that I'm very different from ordinary women because I've read books, walked out of the house, and even rebelled against the orthodoxy and entered the army. There aren't many women like me in the world. But if you let those women be like me and see the snow of the Liangzhou Guard, the water of Jiang City, the long moon of the desert, and the rivers, seas, and mountains, do you think they'll be willing to be trapped in a house that's filled with jealousy? Do you think they'll still be complacent, numb, and ignorant?" He Yen smiled. At this moment, her smile carried a bit of ridicule. It was actually somewhat similar to Xiao Ju's. "I think the men in the world are worried about this point, so they've set up many ridiculous rules to bind women. They've used the 3 cardinal principles and 5 constant principles to break their wings. They've also used those groundless virtuous wives and beauties to judge them. The more ignorant they are, the more the men feel at ease. It's clearly their fault, but they still have to say, 'Look, women are shallow.' Because they also know that once a woman has the chance to choose, she'll definitely not be willing to become a vase in the backyard waiting for her husband to feed her. Those outstanding women will become generals, swordsmen, scholars, and aides. They'll compete with them for the glory of the world, and they won't necessarily win." The girl's eyes were clear and bright like the spring water in Jiang City. They were transparent and clear, and one could see them clearly. They were clean and translucent, as if they could reflect the most brilliant sunlight. Chu Zhao was momentarily stunned. He had always been eloquent and would never make the atmosphere awkward, but at this moment, he actually didn't know what to say. It was as if no matter what he said, he couldn't refute the person in front of him. It was clearly laughable, overconfident, and naive to the point that it made people feel annoyed. It was awe-inspiring righteousness, but it actually reflected a person's shadow. There was nowhere to hide in the darkness. He Yen also felt that it was unfair. Although pretending to be He Rufei brought a lot of pain to her life, at the same time, it also allowed her to see many things that women couldn't see in their entire lives. If she didn't pretend to be He Rufei, she wouldn't have known that compared to women, men could do so much more. If you were talented in literature, you could become a scholar with a stomach full of scriptures. If you were outstanding in martial arts, you could become a general with outstanding military achievements. Even if you were mediocre in everything, you could still be the most ordinary person on the street. To put it bluntly, even in Lutong village, women were gambling prostitutes, while men were gambling customers. It was because she later became young Mistress Su, and had been both a man and a woman that she knew that the world treated men and women differently. It wasn't that men didn't suffer, but their suffering could become the cornerstone to judge themselves. As for women's suffering, they waited their entire lives for men's affirmation. They were all reincarnated as humans, so who was more noble than the other? The funny thing was that some men even looked down on women from the bottom of their hearts. It made people speechless. After she finished speaking in one breath, she realized that Chu Zhao didn't say anything for a while. She secretly thought, could it be that my words offended Chu Zhao? But on second thought, if she offended him, then so be it. In any case, he didn't have the strength to truss a chicken. Even if he fought, he wouldn't be able to beat her. Brother Chu, what I said just now was a bit too impatient. He Yen said with a smile, I hope Brother Chu won't mind my lack of manners. I won't. Chu Zhao looked at her with a strange look in his eyes. He's heart is admirable. Chu Zhao is ashamed of his inferiority. In the future, I won't say such nonsense like today. He's words, I will always keep them in my heart. Chu Zhao was really a gentleman. Just now, she had said a lot of things, but he was still very gentle like a spring breeze. He Yen smiled, then let's go quickly. Chu Zhao nodded and smiled in response. The two of them continued to walk on the road back to Chui Manor. He Yen lowered his head and secretly sighed in his heart. Chu Zhao and Xiao Ju were ultimately different. When dealing with women, they both thought that women were weak and couldn't protect themselves. However, the former's judgment had a trace of negation and condescension, while the latter's treatment of the female corpse in the backyard of the Sun family in Liangzhou City was more of pity. As a general, he should be magnanimous, upright, calm, and brave. But more importantly, he should have a heart of pity for the weak. When He Yen and Chu Zhao came back, it was already very late. Chu Zhao's courtyard was a bit further away than He Yan's courtyard. When they reached the door, Chu Zhao said, he should also rest early today. Brother Chu, remember to eat it early. He Yen was still thinking about his candy basket painting, so he reminded him. He looked at the flower basket in his hand, shook his head, and smiled, definitely. He Yen watched him leave, then turned around and wanted to go back to the room. When she looked back, she saw a person standing in the small pavilion under the long corridor, looking at her with a smile. His white clothes fluttered in the wind. It was Lu Buwang. Master hasn't rested yet? He Yen walked over and asked. She rarely saw Lu Buwang these days at night. I came out to get some fresh air. Lu Buwang looked at her. Did you go to buy candy paintings? He Yen nodded. Fourth young Master Chu helped me hide my identity. After thinking about it, I still gave him something. I was kind to him, so he couldn't go around telling others my secret. Candy paintings in Jiang City are quite cheap. I gave him the most expensive one. It's at least 10 copper coins in Shuajing City, but only 8 copper coins here. It's cheap and good. Lu Buwang smiled and looked at her. You're much more lively now than before. He Yen was stunned. When she met Lu Buwang in her previous life, it was the most difficult time. She had just escaped from the peaceful days in Shuajing City and came to the cruel and bloody military camp. She had many secrets, so she was always a little cautious. Even though she occasionally showed her unbridled side when she was with Lu Buwang on the mountain, most of the time, she tried not to cause trouble for others. Now that she thought about it, it seemed that since she became Lady He, she had unconsciously let go of herself a lot. For example, going out to buy candy paintings with Chu Zhao today was absolutely impossible in the past. Was it because she was a woman now, or was it because she could do whatever she wanted without the restrictions of the He family? And she didn't have to worry about the secret under the mask being seen by others? Isn't it good to be like this now? He Yen said with a smile, it doesn't have to be steady. Lu Buwang said, it's good to be like this. When he said this, he looked a little disappointed. No one knew what he was thinking. He Yen wanted to ask, but when she saw Lu Buwang's indifferent gaze, she swallowed the words back. Lu Buwang seemed a little sad. The moon in spring was not as bright as the one in autumn. It was hazy and cute. Lu Buwang's gaze fell on the corners of his little disciple's mouth, but another figure appeared in his mind. Mu Hongjin. Back then Mu Hongjin was also like this. Her eyes were clean and bright, and occasionally there was a trace of wisdom in them. Her red dress was also delicate, and there were always some flowers and birds embroidered on the corners of her dress, which was exquisite and beautiful. The young girl always had 2 long braids with silver bells under them. When she walked, the bells would make a pleasant tinkling sound. Sometimes, before he got close, he would hear the sound of the bells and know that she had come. At that time, he had such a tail following him every day, which was really annoying. He had said many times that he hoped the two of them would part ways. Every time, Mu Hongjin would pout and immediately cry. No matter how hard Lu Buwang's heart was, he was not good at dealing with a girl's tears. So every time she easily resolved it. In the end, he had tacitly agreed that this person was a sticky candy that he couldn't get rid of. He let her follow him and cause trouble for him. Mu Hongjin knew how to enjoy life. She had brought a lot of money, but in less than half a month she squandered it all. At that time, Lu Buwang didn't know that Mu Hongjin was the beloved daughter of King Mengji, and he only despised her extravagant and lascivious life. She didn't care what Lu Buwang thought of her. She had so much money, and she insisted that he enjoy it with her. Half a month later, Mu Hongjin had spent all her money, so she had to eat with Lu Buwang. In the inn, they slept in the simplest kind, and the food was also very ordinary. Mu Hongjin didn't have money to buy the trinkets on the street. After half a day, she protested to Lu Buwang, "Young hero, can't we have a good meal?" Lu Buwang didn't have much money. The 7 disciples of Taoist Yunji went down the mountain to gain experience. Although it was said that they went down the mountain to gain experience, in fact, they were just experiencing the secular world. As for what they did in daily life, his senior fellow apprentices gave him some of the work they had received before. To put it bluntly, they took the money from others and had to eliminate disasters for others. It was just that their sect was not allowed to do evil or curry favor for personal gain. So much so that in the end, what they really did was to help the tenants of the farmstead find their lost sheep, or help a married girl send a secret letter back to her maiden home. These kinds of trivial matters, and the money they received was also very little. Sometimes, they even had to help people write letters to their families. They didn't refuse anyone and accepted everything. A cold and otherworldly young man in white walked on the path of the farmstead with a lost sheep. The scene was a little funny. Mu Hongjin laughed at him. "What kind of sect do you belong to? Why do you have to do everything? Why don't you follow me?" "You what?" Lu Buwang asked her angrily. Mu Hongjin rolled her beautiful eyes. "I'll pay you more than he does." Lu Buwang was so angry that he didn't want to speak. But it was true. After all, he hadn't finished the task his senior fellow apprentice gave him. Because he was doing these small things, he didn't get much money. If he was alone, it would be fine. But now that Mu Hongjin was with him, he had spent all his money. One person had become 2 people. Life was so tight that he wished he could split a copper coin in half to spend it. It could be seen that Mu Hongjin was also trying her best to adapt to this rough life. She made a fuss for a few days, but when she saw that Lu Buwang was really a little angry, she didn't dare to say anything more. She honestly lived a simple life with Lu Buwang. But her habit of wanting to buy everything she saw in her bones still hadn't changed. Lu Buwang still remembered that one day, they met an old woman selling flowers beside a tea house outside Jiang City. There were 2 bamboo baskets and a carrying pole in front of the old woman, and the bamboo baskets were full of wild chrysanthemums. They were slender and lovely, light pink and white. They were also very cheap. They should have been picked directly from the foot of Chiyun Mountain. Mu Hongjin leaned over to take a look. Seeing this, the old woman said with a smile, "Young master, buy me a flower to wear." "No need." Okay. The 2 of them spoke at the same time. Lu Buwang gave Mu Hongjin a warning look, and Mu Hongjin pursed her lips aggrievedly. The old woman smiled, picked a flower from the bamboo basket, and gave it to Mu Hongjin. "You're pretty, so this flower is for you. Wear it on your head. It's very beautiful." Mu Hongjin took it happily. She said sweetly with a smile, "Thank you, Granny." In this case, Lu Buwang couldn't just leave, so he took out a copper coin from his sleeve and handed it to the old woman. No. The old woman looked at him with a smile. "The little girl is cute. I like her. Young master, just treat her better in the future." Lu Buwang turned his head. Mu Hongjin got the flower and put it on her ear happily. She asked Lu Buwang, "Is it beautiful?" Lu Buwang said uncomfortably, It has nothing to do with me. Mu Hongjin glared at him, squatted down, and looked at the jewelry and cosmetics in the carrying pole. After a while, she picked up a silver bracelet and exclaimed, "This is beautiful." It was a very simple silver bracelet. It seemed to have been roughly polished by someone, and even the edges were not very smooth. On the edge of the bracelet, a circle of lifelike wild chrysanthemums was carved, so it looked fresh and lovely. "This is so beautiful," Mu Hongjin praised. "This is called a happy bracelet. It was carved by my husband and me together." The old woman said with a smile, "Give one to your sweetheart and wear it for the rest of your life. Young master, why don't you buy one for me? It will last forever." "Did you hear that, young hero Lu?" Mu Hongjin begged, "Quickly give me one." Lu Buwang looked at her coldly, took the silver bracelet from her hand, and put it back into the carrying pole. Then, he said coldly to the old woman, "She's not my sweetheart." A trace of disappointment flashed through Mu Hongjin's eyes. In the end, she didn't take the silver bracelet again and muttered, "How do you know that I'm not your sweetheart?" "How do you know?" "Yes, how do I know?" The young man was proud and didn't understand that the joy of youth came quietly. By the time he understood, it had already become a calamity and there was no way to avoid it. Later, many years had passed. Lu Buwang often thought that if he had bought the silver bracelet in front of Mu Hongjin and put it on her hand that day, they wouldn't have come to that point. As the old woman said, they wouldn't have been separated for the rest of their lives. It was ridiculous that he also believed that strange forces and gods were predestined. The moonlight sprinkled on the ground, forming a layer of white frost. The bell in his memory gradually faded away, and only the wind in Jiang City that had been separated for many years fell in his ears. It was lonely and a little cold in his heart. "Do you like Xiaoju?" The unexpected voice interrupted He Yan's contemplation. He Yan turned his head in surprise. Lu Buwang retracted his gaze and looked at her with a knowing smile. He repeated again, "He, do you like Xiaoju?" He Yan subconsciously retorted. After a while, she asked again, "Master, why do you say that? Haven't you noticed?" Lu Buwang said lightly, "When you're around him, you're very relaxed. You trust him more than you trust me." He Yan was stunned. Did she? Maybe she did. Whether it was in the previous life or this life, she might have many misunderstandings about Xiaoju's appearance in her heart. Whether he was indifferent or bad, she had never doubted that Xiaoju would hurt her from the beginning to the end. He Yan, who seemed to be careless about everything, always maintained a sense of vigilance in her heart. She didn't let go of this vigilance when facing Lu Buwang, Su Jiheng He Rufei, and even He Sui and his son who had no attacking power in the He family. But she always trusted Xiaoju. It's not time or experience that makes you so relaxed now. It's him. Lu Buwang's voice was gentle. "Ahi, do you still want to deny it?" He Yan didn't speak. After a while, she raised her head and looked at the moon hanging on the roof. The moon was big and white, and its silver light sprinkled over the whole yard, gently watching the people in the night. "Master, look at the moon in the sky," she said slowly. "It can shine on the backyard of the rich and the ditch in the wilderness. But you can't catch it, right? I can't catch the moon, nor can I make the moon come for me, so I can just stand here and look at it from afar." Chapter 149. When He Yan returned to the room, the lights were still on. The two maidservants were lying on the side of the room, playing with a flower rope. When they saw He Yan, they quickly stood up and greeted, "Madam." He Yan whispered, "It's nothing. You can sleep. I'm going to rest." "Is young master asleep?" Cui Jiao shook her head. "Young master has been reading." He Yan nodded. "I know. You should rest early too." She pushed the door open and entered the room. Xiaoju was sitting at the table, flipping through a long scroll in his hand. He was only wearing his inner garment. The snow-white garment hung loosely on his shoulders, revealing his jade-like skin. His collarbone was thin and as beautiful as the moon. He Yan closed the door and walked to his side. "Governor?" he asked. Xiaoju only raised her eyes and glanced at her indifferently without saying a word. "I thought you were asleep." He Yen removed the whip from her waist and hung it on the wall. The colorful tassel hanging from the handle of the whip swayed with her movements. The red pomegranate flower was even more exquisite and very eye-catching. Xiao Ju's gaze fell on the colorful tassel. He Yen saw that Xiao Ju was looking at it, so she took off the whip and handed it to him. What do you think? Commander, does it look good? This is a gift from 4th young Master Chu. Chu Xylan is so generous. Xiao Ju narrowed her eyes and said calmly, it's such an expensive gift. He doesn't think it's a waste to give it to you. Expensive? He Yen asked curiously. 4th young Master Chu said that this pomegranate flower is fake jade and isn't worth much. I accepted it because he said so. He raised his eyebrows and said mockingly, he's very considerate. Is it really that expensive? He Yen was a little uneasy. Then I'll return it to him tomorrow. If there were any unclean things in the future, such as money, it was better to be clear about it. Xiao Ju said, just accept it. Don't you like him very much? He Yen was shocked. Do I like him? Why didn't she know? I didn't want to meddle in your business, but I still have to remind you. The young man's eyebrows were unbelievably handsome under the light. His eyes were dark and deep, with a hint of inexplicable coldness. Chu Xylan is Su Jingfu's son-in-law. If you don't want to die, stay away from him. Su Pingting was the apple of Su Jingfu's eye. She seemed to like Chu Xylan. Lin Shuanghe had told her about it before. But what did it have to do with her? Not to mention whether she liked Chu Zhao or not, Chu Zhao was such a refined and polite person. He would definitely not like a woman who sat cross-legged on the bed and practiced boxing. Xiao Ju was worried for nothing. Commander-in-Chief, I think you're too anxious about 4th young Master Chu. You're even prejudiced against me. She squeezed to Xiao Ju's side and bent down to look at the scroll in Xiao Ju's hand. It's so late. What are you looking at? Xiao Ju ignored her. He Yen stood behind him and craned his neck to look. After a while, he said, it's a military defense map. What do you think? Do you see any problems? The way you speak, Xiao Ju said calmly, makes it sound like you're the commander-in-chief. He Yen immediately withdrew his hand from his shoulder and moved a stool to sit beside him. He said, I'm just too concerned. The Yudo will soon know that Princess Mengji has been evacuating the citizens of Jiang City these past few days. Once the Yudo receive the news, they will soon mobilize their troops. He Yen had a headache. But there are too few soldiers in Jiang City. Since the Yudo dared to attack the city, they must have brought no less than 100,000 soldiers. 20,000 against 100,000. These 20,000 soldiers were the city gate guards who had not fought in many years. No matter how one looked at it, the situation was not very comforting. Weren't you a female general in your previous life? Xiao Ju leaned back in his chair and twitched the corner of his mouth. Tell me what to do. He Yen was stunned. What was this? He was obviously telling the truth, but it was treated as a lie. In the military defense map, they came from the water. He Yen said, since that's the case, we can only attack with water. After saying this, she carefully raised her eyes to look at Xiao Ju's expression. The young man's expression was as calm as ever. The wine sword hanging on the wall was sparkling like snow and was as cold as ice. Strangely enough, she and Xiao Ju had a life and death experience in the water. When it came to water, there was always a shadow in their hearts. The other was that their first battle was a water battle. To him, attacking with water was not a good memory. However, they were in Jiang City. No matter what, they could not avoid such a battle. He Yen suspected that she and Xiao Ju were fire spirits in their previous lives. They had such an ill-fated relationship with water. Tomorrow morning, I will go to the martial arts field to train the soldiers. Xiao Ju said, you should go too. He Yen hesitated. I really want to go, but won't Princess Mengji be unhappy? In name, Xiao Ju was De Wei's right military commander. No one could train soldiers better than him. However, He Yen was only Xiao Ju's subordinate. Don't worry about her. Xiao Ju said, you should go with me. It was late at night. A man sat in front of the long table in the room and quietly looked at the basket of flowers on the table. The sugar paintings were red and sparkling under the warm light of the oil lamp. The flowers in the basket were dense and luxuriant. In front of the basket, there were 2 words written, Zilon. Upright and beautiful. A smiling voice seemed to ring in his ears. Zhao means light, while Zilon means vanilla. The person who gave you this name must have loved you very much and hoped that you would have a bright future. That's why they gave you such an elegant name. The person who gave him this name must have loved him very much? Chu Zhao never thought so. His mother was called Yi Runmei. She was the daughter of a small official in Qin County. She was as beautiful as a fairy. His memory was the same. She was a woman with impeccable features. She was beautiful, charming, and pitiful. In her delicate posture, there was a hint of innocence and nobility. He would never forget such a beauty even if he saw her once. Many men in Qin County wished to marry Yi Runmei, but Yi Runmei had taken a fancy to the equally handsome Shijinbo, Chu Linfeng, who came to Qin County to work. Even in Shuojing, Chu Linfeng was a rare handsome man. In addition, he was generous with his money and had been in the midst of women for so many years. He knew very well how to please people. Not long after, Yi Runmei secretly fell in love with this romantic and considerate young Master Chu. Not only did she fall in love with him, but she also spent a good night with him. However, in only 3 months, Chu Linfeng had to leave Qin County and return to Shuojing. Before leaving, Chu Linfeng told Yi Runmei that he would come back to marry her. At that time, Yi Runmei was immersed in her dream of waiting for her sweetheart to marry her. She didn't realize that other than knowing Chu Linfeng's name and where he lived in Shuojing, she knew nothing about him. After Chu Linfeng left, there was no more news about him. Not long after he left, Yi Runmei found out that she was pregnant. She was anxious and scared. She didn't dare to tell anyone. However, her belly grew bigger day by day. In the end, she couldn't hide it. Master Yi was furious. He asked Yi Runmei who the father of the child was. Yi Runmei didn't even know the father's true identity. How could she say it clearly? She could only cry nonstop. In the end, Master Yi had no choice but to call a doctor. He planned to abort the child in Yi Runmei's belly. After a year and a half, he would send Yi Runmei to get married. This matter would rot in her belly forever. Yi Runmei knew her father's plan and ran away that night. She didn't want to abort the child. She didn't know if it was because she missed Chu Linfeng or because of other reasons. Anyway, she ran away. Yi Runmei decided to go to Shuojing to find Chu Linfeng. She was a pregnant woman. How could she walk so far? However, because of her beauty, she met a merchant along the way. He took the initiative to help her and agreed to take her to Shuojing. Before they reached Shuojing, Yi Runmei gave birth. Chu Zhao was born at this time. After Chu Zhao was born, Yi Runmei's miserable days had just begun. The merchant wasn't a kind person. He liked Yi Runmei's beauty and wanted her to be his concubine. Yi Runmei refused and scratched the merchant. In anger, the merchant sold Yi Runmei to a brothel for 10 taels of silver. Chu Zhao was also sold. The brothel mother thought that since Yi Runmei was so beautiful, her son wouldn't be bad either. If he was good-looking in the future, she might be able to earn another sum of money. If he wasn't good-looking, it wouldn't be a loss to be a servant. Yi Runmei and Chu Zhao lived together in the brothel. The pampered and spoiled young miss didn't know the evils of the world. In the brothel, she saw all kinds of ugly and evil people. It was as if they wanted to take back everything she had in the past. Yi Runmei's life was worse than death. The long-term torture changed her temperament. She became irritable and irritable. She didn't dare to be rash in front of her clients, but she vented her anger in front of Chu Zhao. She often beat Chu Zhao. If it wasn't for the protection of the other girls in the brothel, Chu Zhao felt that he wouldn't have lived to see Chu Linfeng. Chu Zhao didn't understand what Yi Runmei's feelings for him were. If she didn't love him, then she left home alone to protect the flesh and blood in her belly. She suffered a lot, but she didn't give up on him. If she loved him, then why did she say those heart-wrenching words to him? Her eyes were full of hatred. She always hit him with the bamboo pole and said, "I hate you. If it wasn't for you, my life wouldn't be like this. Why did you appear? Why don't you die?" After the vicious curses, she looked at the scars on Chu Zhao's body and hugged him. She cried, "I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Zhao, Xylan, don't blame me. I feel sorry for you." He was at a loss when he was young. He didn't know whether he loved or not. He just looked at the crying woman and felt a trace of disgust. He hoped that these days would end soon. He hoped that he could grow up quickly and escape from this dirty and hopeless place. Yi Runmei wasn't the only one with such thoughts. She was also looking for an opportunity. She never gave up on finding Chu Linfeng. She cursed Chu Linfeng's heartlessness and was full of hope for him. She always looked at Chu Zhao as if she was looking at all the hope. Maybe she left Chu Zhao in the past so that one day when she saw Chu Linfeng again, she could stand in front of him and tell him, "This is your son." Then she would tell him all the hardships and sufferings in the past few years. Chu Linfeng would feel sorry for her and marry her as he said to her in the past. He would make up for what he owed her and her son all these years. Yi Runmei thought so she always took the initiative to entertain every guest from Shuajing. She was born beautiful and easily became the top beauty in the brothel. Although she wasn't in Shuajing, there were always people from Shuajing who came and went. One day, she actually met someone who knew Chu Linfeng. That person was Chu Linfeng's friend. At first, when he heard Yi Runmei talk about the sad past, he just thought it was fun and occasionally comforted her to satisfy his kindness as a savior. But when he heard that the person was called Chu Linfeng, was handsome, and was from Shuajing, his face gradually changed. Those who knew Chu Linfeng knew that he was a womanizer and was especially lecherous. It wasn't impossible for him to hook up with a woman from a small family when he was outside. But this matter wasn't done properly. In any case, she told the truth and let him give up. She didn't leave him in the same place and wait for so many years. Instead, it became an ill-fated relationship. My poor child. I don't know if he will have the chance to see his father in this life. Yi Runmei covered her face and cried. "You have a child?" The friend was shocked and asked, "Can I see him?" Yi Runmei let Chu Zhao out. Chu Zhao's nose and mouth were like Yi Runmei's, but his eyebrows and eyes were the same as Chu Linfeng's. They were gentle and affectionate. When he looked at people, he always seemed to have a gentle smile. If this face said that he was Chu Linfeng's son, no one would doubt it. The friend got up, said a few perfunctory words, and hurried out. Yi Runmei was very disappointed. When the friend returned to Shuajing, the first thing he did was to find Chu Linfeng at Count Shijin's residence and ask him if he had a brief relationship with a beauty many years ago in Qin County. Chu Linfeng thought for a long time and finally vaguely remembered that it was a very beautiful woman. Unfortunately, she was a little stupid and believed everything he said without a doubt. "That woman is now living in a brothel," the friend said. "She even gave birth to a son for you. I've seen that child. He looks very similar to you and is very beautiful." This was out of Chu Linfeng's expectations. Madame Chu was ugly and had never cared about his affairs outside. Thus, he was happy and at ease. He brought 19 concubines into the residence, all of whom were outstanding beauties. Unfortunately, Madame Chu only had one condition. He could take concubines, but the child had to crawl out of her womb. Madame Chu gave birth to 3 children. Chu Linfeng didn't have much interest in having more children, so he felt that it was enough. His only regret was that none of his 3 sons had inherited his looks. Their looks were mediocre. He knew that his colleagues and friends were laughing at him behind his back. He had been greedy for good looks all his life, but unfortunately his sons were mediocre and not attractive enough. But now, someone had come to tell him that he actually had a son who was lost outside. Moreover, the son was very outstanding and looked very similar to him. To him, this was a good thing that fell from the sky. For a moment, he really wanted this child to acknowledge his ancestors. This way, if others said that he couldn't give birth to a good-looking son, he could ruthlessly slap them in the face. However, Chu Linfeng had been respectful to his wife for many years. Although Madame Chu looked dignified, she wasn't someone to be trifled with. Otherwise, the concubines in the Chu residence wouldn't have no sons. Chu Linfeng had no choice but to beg the old madam, his mother. Although Madame Chu didn't care much about a concubine's son, he was still the blood of the Chu family. It wasn't good for him to be wandering outside, especially in a brothel. Thus, she personally went to find Madame Chu. Madame Chu and the old madam talked for 2 hours. When they left the residence, Madame Chu personally ordered people to go to the brothel in Danzhou to bring the concubine's son back. However, that concubine's son didn't mention Yi Runmei. Although Shi Jinbo wasn't the most powerful person in the capital, he was still a high-ranking official. To the people of Danzhou, he was even more unreachable. When the letter flew from the capital to Danzhou, Yi Runmei almost couldn't believe her eyes. She knew that Chu Linfeng wasn't an ordinary person. He was so generous and his charm was especially different from the men in Qin County. His family background wasn't bad. However, she didn't expect him to be the current Shi Jinbo. He was someone she didn't even dare to think about in her life. It was as if she had endured and planned for this moment for many years and finally reaped the sweet fruit. She hugged Chu Zhao and cried with joy. "Xylin, your father is here to pick us up. We can go home now." Chu Zhao quietly allowed the woman's emotional tears to fall on his neck. His young face was indifferent to his age. Go home? Who could be sure that this was just jumping from one fire pit to another? After all these years in the brothel, the men he saw were all greedy and evil, and the women were all stupid and weak. There was no difference. However, Yi Runmei didn't think so. She spent all her savings to buy many beautiful clothes and jewelry. She dressed Chu Zhao like a young master from a rich family and dressed herself like a charming flower. She looked at the woman in the mirror. She was still beautiful, but her skin wasn't as smooth as when she was young. There was no more innocence in her eyes, no more coquettish. She cried. Spring was as beautiful as before, but the beauty was past her prime. And the man who promised to marry her hadn't come yet. Yi Runmei thought that since Chu Linfeng was Shi Jinbo, he definitely wouldn't marry her, but it would be good to make her a concubine. Her son was also Shi Jinbo's son. She had been living a hard life in the brothel all these years. Being a concubine of an official was more noble than being a prostitute here. She wanted to dress herself up beautifully. When she saw Chu Linfeng, she wanted to tell him how much she suffered for him all these years. She wanted to tell him how much she loved him. Yi Runmei thought that she was clever. Any man in the world would feel proud when he heard that a beauty was infatuated with him. And this pride would make him feel more tender and doting on the beauty, so as to show his heroic feelings. She wouldn't let go of this opportunity. She wanted to regain Chu Linfeng's favor. Even if she was only a concubine, she wanted to be the one who attracted him the most. However, Yi Runmei didn't expect that Chu Linfeng didn't come. It was 2 women and a group of servants who came. They looked at Yi Runmei condescendingly. They couldn't help but look at her with contempt. It was as if they would dirty their eyes if they looked at her more. The leading woman asked, "Where is young Master Chu?" Yi Runmei felt humiliated. She wanted to get angry, but in the end, she put on a humble smile. "He's changing in the next room." She had told Chu Zhao in advance to put in the jade hairpin to make her look elegant and cute. Good. The woman lowered her eyes and smiled insincerely. Yi Runmei felt uneasy. She asked, "What do you want to do?" One woman came over and pulled her hand back. Another servant covered her mouth with a handkerchief. Yi Runmei's eyes widened. She realized what they were going to do to her. She struggled with all her might and said angrily, "How dare you? How dare you? Aren't you afraid that Chu Linfeng will find out? Chu Linfeng will kill you." The woman looked at her coldly. Her smile was bone-chilling. "We don't dare to make such a big decision without the master's permission. Miss Smith." She called Yi Runmei by her name in the brothel. "Would our Count Shi Jinbo's mansion accept a prostitute who rides thousands of men in the brothel? Do you want people to laugh at the master, or do you want people to laugh at your son?" Yi Runmei struggled with all her might, but her body was slender and weak. How could she be a match for the woman? She gradually lost her strength. Getting rid of the mother and keeping the son is already a gift to you. Yi Runmei's legs gradually stopped moving. She fell straight to the ground with her eyes wide open. She had waited for her husband all her life. She was so happy that she thought she had made it, but she was waiting for death. Chu Zhao put in the hairpin and looked around in the mirror for a long time. Then he walked to his mother's room. He wanted to knock on the door, but when he reached out his hand, he hesitated. He gently pushed the door a little to see what his father looked like. Then he saw two old women carrying Yi Runmei as if they were carrying a dead pig. They hung a piece of white silk on the beam and covered Yi Runmei's head with it. Yi Runmei's face was facing the door. Her eyes met his. Surrounded by pearls and jade, beautiful snow and red makeup, holding hatred toward the netherworld, unwilling to close her eyes even in death. He staggered and covered his mouth to prevent himself from screaming. The people in the room were still talking. She is beautiful, but how can she be so stupid? She still wants to marry into the family? She didn't even think about it. Which rich family would accept a woman from a brothel as a concubine? After all, she came from a small family. She doesn't know what it means to get rid of the mother and keep the son. If she had stayed in Qing County, she wouldn't have lost her life. Tiske, she's just greedy. Chu Zhao slowly retreated. When he was far enough away from the door, he suddenly ran. He didn't know which family he was in, but he closed the door tightly. He gritted his teeth and silently cried. A woman's voice seemed to fall into his ears. It had a rare gentleness. Beautiful clothes like a hero's, rotten clothes like a bright star. From now on, you will be called A Zhao. One day, our A Zhao will be like Almighty Yun, wearing beautiful clothes, looking beautiful and brilliant. As for the character, let's call you Xylan. Orchid is beautiful and fragrant. Mother, I used to love orchids the most. He innocently said, in the future, A Zhao will buy many, many orchids for mother. The woman's laughter gradually faded away. His eyes fell on the flower basket in front of him. The fire was slightly hot. Chu Zhao paused for a moment, then threw the flower basket on the table into the fire. The flame licked the basket. After a while, the syrup flowed everywhere, giving off a burnt sweetness. He walked away expressionlessly. Chapter 150. The next morning, He Yen and Xiao Ju had an early breakfast and went to Jiang City's martial arts practice field to see the Jiang City's army. Lin Shuanghe didn't follow them and rested in the Cui mansion. Lu Buwang continued to track down the whereabouts of those Yuto and went out at the same time as He Yen and Xiao Ju. There were many rivers in Jiang City, and the city was built on the water. The water cut the flat land into several large and small pieces, so it wasn't easy to find large open spaces. The martial arts practice field was built close to the prince's mansion for no other reason than that there was a large open space here. When He Yen and Xiao Ju went over, they met Cui Yuezhi. When Cui Yuezhi saw the two of them, he smiled and cupped his hands. Military Governor Xiao. As if he could see He Yan's surprise, Cui Yuezhi patted Xiao Ju's shoulder with a smile. Actually, I started to suspect you the second day you came to Jiang. Even my concubine could tell that you really don't look like anyone from the Cui family at all. How could you be my eldest brother's son? It's just that when I brought you into the prince's mansion, His Highness often called you in, so he must have known your identities long ago. Since His Highness has plans, I can only pretend to be stupid and not say anything. This Cui Yuezhi was quite smart. He chuckled, but there was a shrewd look in his eyes on his simple and honest face. If His Highness thinks I'm stupid, then I'll be stupid. There's nothing wrong with being stupid. He Yen understood that Cui Yuezhi could become Mu Hongjin's confidant not only because he was brave, but also because he was Qing Mei's childhood sweetheart. It was because he was stupid at the right time. With such a simple and honest subordinate, of course, she had to trust him and put him in an important position. He was a very wise person. Cui Yuezhi looked at Xiao Ju again. His Highness told me that all the Jiang City's army will listen to Military Governor Zhao's command from today onwards. His expression became serious. His Highness has already told me about the Yuto. I will do my best to cooperate with Military Governor Xiao. The citizens of Jiang City are still under the protection of Military Governor Xiao. Has your Highness already begun to move the citizens of the city? He Yen asked. From today onwards, it's just that. Cui Yuezhi sighed. It won't be easy. The citizens of the city were used to living here peacefully. When they received news that Jiang was in trouble and had to evacuate the city, they naturally panicked. The younger ones were still fine. Those who were sick, old, and had no one to take care of them could not leave. How could those who owned businesses and shops in the city be at ease to leave everything behind? However, Cui Yuezhi perked up. I've always heard that General Feng Yun is invincible on the battlefield. This Cui has long wanted to meet her. I didn't expect military governor Xiao to be so young and handsome. He was half envious and half amazed. How can there be such a person favored by the heavens in this world? He Yan. This kind of experience of favoritism was probably something that ordinary people couldn't bear. As he spoke, he had already walked to the side of the training field. As Jiang City was close to the water and had not fought a war for many years, the soldiers did not have armor. They only wore cloth armor. The cloth armor was green, and each of them held a long spear. It was probably because they did a lot of manual labor that they all looked mighty and powerful. However, Hien could tell at a glance that their military formation was not lethal. It was like a decorative frame, and it was a somewhat old-fashioned decorative frame. All these years, Mu Hongjin probably didn't spend much effort on the training of the city's army. However, this was understandable. Ever since King Mengji's generation, Jiang had been at peace with Lun. Not to mention fighting wars, they were even good at stealing and swindling in the city. The people were simple and honest, so there was no need to spend much effort on this. Be prepared for danger in times of peace. He Yen shook his head. Jiang's city army has been slacking off for too long. Cui Yuezhi looked at He Yen. He had already found out from Mu Hongjin that He Yen was Xiao Ju's subordinate. However, he thought that the subordinate was Xiao Ju's servant, a delicate wife, that was prepared to fit the identity of Xiao Huanqing better during this trip to Jiang. Although he was puzzled midway and thought that this servant's relationship with Xiao Ju was a little too casual, he was curious when he heard He Yan's words. Yen, do you see anything? Cui Zhongqi, my surname is He, and my name is Yen. I can't see anything else, but I feel that the military formation of Jiang City's city army is a little old-fashioned. In Shuajing, we stopped fighting like this a few years ago. Miss Yen, Cui Yuezhi puffed out his chest and said disapprovingly, when setting up a military formation, it doesn't mean that the newer the better. It also depends on whether it's suitable for use or not. This military formation is something that I came up with after discussing with my colleagues in the army. It's very suitable for Jiang's terrain. How can you say that it's old-fashioned? He did not dare to boast that he was better than Xiao Ju, but he was still better than Xiao Ju's subordinates. A good military formation could only be created after many years. He Yen was not talking about a new dish. Who would be able to change it every few days just for the sake of freshness? He Yen saw that the military formation was full of loopholes, so she did not want to criticize him. She glanced at Xiao Ju again. Seeing that Xiao Ju did not say anything, she did not have any intention of objecting. She thought for a while and said tactfully, let's not talk about the military formation. Just based on the movements of the city army, it looks more like they're practicing. I'm afraid that they're lacking something on the battlefield. What are they lacking? Cui Yuezhi asked. Dauntless. He Yen said, these city army soldiers can only deal with soldiers who are weaker than them or soldiers who are on par with them. If there are soldiers who are more ferocious and brutal than them. He Yen shook her head. I'm afraid that they won't be able to win. As they spoke, they had already walked to the front of the training field. He Yan's words fell into the ears of the soldiers at the front. The young man standing at the front was holding a long spear and thrusting it forward. When he heard what He Yen said, he could not help but glance at her. When Cui Yuezhi heard He Yen say that about his soldiers, he was a little unconvinced. Miss Yen, you make it sound like the Jiang army is made of tofu. He Yen was not lying. This batch of Jiang City army soldiers had probably not been to a real battlefield. They were even weaker than the new recruits of the Liang province guards. After living a peaceful life for a long time, even a tiger's claws would lose their strength. Moreover, Yudo came prepared. They would not be as weak as a lamb. I'm just a little worried, He Yen said. Miss, suddenly, someone spoke. He Yen turned her head to look. The one who spoke was the young man who held a spear and stood at the head of the group. His skin had been tanned by the sun and his appearance was very handsome. He didn't fear Xiao Ju, who was standing at the side at all. He looked at He Yen and coldly said, "What do you mean by saying that our city's army is worthless? Although Jiang City has been peaceful for many years, the city army has been training hard every day. They don't dare to slack off for even a day. Miss, you haven't been there yet, so it's better not to jump to conclusions so easily." He Yen said, "I'm not jumping to conclusions so easily." The young man did not know He Yen, nor did he know Xiao Ju's identity. He thought that Cui Yuezhi had brought his nephew and niece-in-law here to observe the soldiers. He was probably young and did not know how to hide his emotions. He also felt a little indignant, so he said to He Yen, "How can a woman understand the affairs of men in the army?" He Yen was speechless. He Yen thought to himself, if this woman really gets angry, even 10 men in the army won't be enough to fight her. If Jiang City's army faced Yudo with such arrogance, there was no way they could win this war. She was thinking about how to tactfully destroy this person's momentum when she suddenly heard Xiao Ju's voice. "If that's the case, you can compete with her." He Yen looked at Xiao Ju. The soldier who spoke was also a little surprised. He did not expect him to make such a lousy suggestion. "This isn't good, right?" He Yen said hesitantly. The soldier felt a little comforted. He thought that this woman was tactful. Before he could say anything else, he heard He Yan's remaining words, "You're still Cui Zhongqi's soldiers. What if you destroy his morale and he can't recover in the future?" Cui Yuezhi was speechless. He was also thinking that Xiao Ju's suggestion was too hasty. Now that he heard He Yan's words, he really didn't know what to say. Cui Yuezhi was also a martial arts practitioner, but he couldn't directly touch He Yan's bone structure. Just from his appearance, He Yen was thin and weak, and he couldn't see anything powerful about him. Xiao Ju said that this girl should know some martial arts. However, compared to Mu Yi, she might be too arrogant. Looking at her thin arms and legs, Mu Yi could easily break her arms. He Yen looked at Xiao Ju. Under the morning light of the martial arts arena, the young man's figure was like jade. The black python on his dark blue robe was baring its fangs and brandishing its claws, adding to his heroic spirit. The arrow sleeves were convenient for holding weapons. Here, he was no longer the second son of the Shao family. He was the commander-in-chief of the Right Army, General Feng'an. Mu Yi, the soldier, didn't say anything. He Yen looked at him and smiled. "What do you think? Little brother, do you want to fight with me?" She was still wearing the red riding uniform of the women of Jiang and black boots. The whip hanging in front of her chest was delicate and cute. She looked lively and harmless. She was no different from the countless young ladies in Jiang who picked flowers and sniffed them in the spring. Most young men always had a competitive spirit. If a girl provoked them verbally, and a pretty girl at that, they would always want to prove themselves. Mu Yi was the same. He thought that he had already given this girl a chance, but she didn't want to give up. He had no choice but to let her have a taste of the power of the Jiang army. Thinking of this, Mu Yi cupped his hands and said, "Excuse me." He Yen faintly smiled. She flipped over and leaped up, stepping onto the wooden stake beside her. The bystanders only saw a red swallow. In the blink of an eye, it had already landed on the empty space in the center of the martial arts field. She slowly pulled out the purple jade whip from her waist and made a "please" gesture. The layman watched for the excitement, while the expert watched for the skill. Her appearance was already unusual. Mu Yi was slightly surprised, but he didn't want to be outdone. He followed her and stood in front of He Yen. One man, one spear, one woman, and one whip. In the blink of an eye, they were entangled in a fight. The surrounding Jiang soldiers had already put down their spears and were staring at them intently. Each army had its own characteristics. For example, the South Mansion soldiers were orderly and serious, the Liangzhou guards were free and straightforward, and the Jiang soldiers were lively and lively. It was as if they were watching a show. They immediately became excited. Good fight. Mu Yi, why can't you do it? Don't go easy on her. Good job, Mississippi beat this brat to death. For a moment, The cheers were endless. Cui Yuezhi stared at the red figure in the middle of the fight. The whip in her hand was like moving clouds and flowing water, winding like lightning. He was extremely surprised. Mu Yi was one of the most outstanding soldiers in the Jiang army. Not to mention how good he was in the army, he was considered one of the best among the people here. However, even Mu Yi was at a disadvantage when facing He Yan. Others thought that Mu Yi was holding back because his opponent was a girl. However, Cui Yuezhi's eyes were sharp. He could tell at a glance that Mu Yi didn't stand a chance. The girl's whip was too fast, and her footwork was too fast. Mu Yi didn't have a chance to attack. If this continued, he would soon be defeated. Cui Yuezhi couldn't help but ask Xiao Ju, Military Governor Xiao, "Is Miss He really your subordinate?" He couldn't find a single subordinate like her in the Jiang army. It really made people jealous. "It's not unfair for your subordinate to lose to the number 1 Liangzhou guard," Xiao Ju said calmly. Number 1 Liangzhou guard? Cui Yuezhi didn't understand, but He Yan was a girl. Could it be that she had fought with the Liangzhou guard before? On the stage, Mu Yi was in a sorry state. Beads of sweat gradually seeped out of his forehead. The girl looked delicate, but her movements were swift and unparalleled. She predicted every move he made. Her movements were also fast, as if she didn't know fatigue. Most importantly, how could a girl have such great strength? With a crack, the whip struck the stone pile beside him. A corner of the stone pile was broken, and the flying gravel brushed past Mu Yi's face. Mu Yi couldn't believe his eyes. That was a stone pile. Normally, even a sword might not be able to break it, but she used a whip. Not only did the whip not break, but He Yan also looked relaxed. What kind of logic was this? Mu Yi naturally didn't know that when He Yan was in the Liangzhou guard, the number of days she threw stone locks was counted in months. He Yan wasn't targeting anyone. In terms of strength, no one present was a match for her. While Mu Yi was thinking, a long whip was already in front of him. He was so shocked that he immediately used the spear in his hand to block it. There was a crack in the air, and the spear actually broke into 2 pieces. The surrounding Jiang army quieted down. They could only hear the girl's laughter echoing in the field. The last 3 strikes. The first strike told you not to look down on girls. Mu Yi was flustered. He grabbed the long broken spear and continued to block. Crack. There was another crack. The broken spear in his hand broke into pieces again. The strong girl tilted her head and sighed. The second strike is arrogant and conceited. It's a big taboo in battle. Mu Yi only had a spear head less than the length of a palm in his hand. He was defenseless for a moment. The third strike was already in front of him, and he couldn't dodge it. The third strike. "Don't be afraid. I won't hurt you." When the long whip rushed in front of him, it mischievously curled up and landed in his hand, taking away the spear head in his hand. When Mu Yi came back to his senses, the girl in the red dress was already playing with his iron spearhead. She walked over and patted his shoulder, returning the spearhead to him. She smiled and said, "There's always someone better than you. Young man, you have to continue to work hard." She walked past Mu Yi and left with a smile. His companions crowded around him and asked, "It can't be, right? Brother Mu, aren't you losing too quickly? Did you deliberately show mercy? How can you be so unambitious?" "Don't talk nonsense." Mu Yi was angry. "I didn't show mercy." His companions looked at each other. Someone said, "Didn't show mercy? Is she really that powerful?" "That's impossible." Another person pointed at his face and said, "Mu Yi, why is your face red?" The noise in the distance fell into his ears, but Cui Yuezhi wasn't in the mood to teach them a lesson. He only sighed. How fast time passed. It hadn't even been half an hour. He defeated the most outstanding person in the Jiang army just like that. Cui Yuezhi could clearly see that He Yan didn't use her full strength. Otherwise, if her whip wasn't aimed at Mu Yi's spear, but at Mu Yi himself, Mu Yi would have suffered a lot. Military Governor Xiao has a good subordinate, Cui Yuezhi said sincerely. When he thought of what he said just now, he was a little worried. The Jiang army is not as good as the Liangzhou guards, but the Liangzhou guards have already fought with the Yudo once. He Yan happened to walk over and said, "The Yudo's savagery and cunning are beyond Cui Zhongqi's imagination. They definitely won't be as merciful as I was just now. If the Jiang army can't win, it will be a disaster for the people in the city." Cui Yuezhi shuddered. "The most important problem isn't the city guards," Xiao Ju said. "Then what is it?" "Jiang has a lot of water. The Yudo can only attack with water. This battle is destined to be fought on water. The reason why your army formation is outdated is because it isn't used for water attacks." Cui Yuezhi frowned. "Can you be more specific, Commander-in-Chief?" He Yan looked at Xiao Ju. She was a little excited. She didn't expect Xiao Ju to have the same idea as her. The young man lowered his eyes. "The boat." The most important thing was the boat. In the attic, the man looked away and smiled with his head lowered. Ying Xiang said softly, "I didn't expect Miss He to be so skilled." Although she already knew that He Yan was one of the best in the Liangzhou guards, she had never seen it with her own eyes. It was hard to imagine that the girl who fought with others in the training field was more dazzling than when she stood quietly as a woman. Although they were both beauties, Ying Xiang felt that He Yan's beauty was especially special among all the women in the world. However, because of this uniqueness, there weren't as many people who admired her as there were people who admired the beauty of the secular world. "Fourth young master," Ying Xiang said, "Princess Mengji has started to evacuate the citizens in the city today. Do you want to go with her?" "Teacher sent me to Jiang to keep an eye on Xiao Huijin. Since Xiao Huijin is here, how can I evacuate by myself?" Chu Zhao's gaze fell on He Yan, who seemed to be talking to Xiao Ju in the distance. He smiled faintly. If military governor Xiao stays in Jiang, he can protect himself even if the Yudo comes. However, young master doesn't know martial arts. It will be dangerous for you to stay in the city. Ying Xiang wanted to persuade him again. "The more dangerous it is, the more it proves my loyalty to teacher." Chu Zhao smiled carelessly. "Ying Xiang, don't you understand? Teacher gave me two options when he assigned this task to me. One option is to die here. The other option is to live and complete the task and return to the capital. If I don't complete the task and return alive, I will still die. Do you understand?" Ying Xiang was silent for a moment, then said, "I understand. You don't need to worry." Chu Zhao looked into the distance with his hands behind his back. "Besides, I have a good friend who knows martial arts. Since she is so righteous and naive, I think she will protect my safety." Ying Xiang followed his gaze and looked at He Yan in the distance. She thought for a moment, then reminded him, "Young master, Miss He is military governor Zhao's subordinate. You also said that she is a subordinate." Chu Zhao smiled and said, "There is no such thing as an unchanging relationship in the world. A loyal partner can become a terrifying enemy in the next moment." He had seen this kind of thing many times. People were fickle. In the prince's mansion, Mu Xiaolu jumped down the stone stairs with a box in her arms. She shouted, "Grandmother!" Mu Hongjin was sitting in the hall. When she heard her, she looked at her tiredly. "What is it, Xiaolu? Aunt Tong told me to only take the important things, but I like everything." Mu Xiaolu said, "Aunt Tong said that the carriage can't be put down. Grandmother, can you keep these for me first? When I return to Jiang, I will ask you for them." Mu Hongjin smiled and opened the box. There were some small toys in the box. There was a cricket made of wood, a spinning top, a small dog made of paper, and a whistle that would sing when blown. Most of them were things that Cui Yuezhi bought from the streets to please Mu Xiaolu. Some of them were things that Mu Xiaolu snatched from her peers who visited the mansion. These were also her treasures. Mu Hongjin closed the lid of the wooden box and handed it to the maid beside her. "Okay, grandmother will keep them for me. When you return to Jiang, you can ask me for them." Mu Xiaolu nodded. "Grandmother, you must take good care of them." Mu Hongjin laughed and tapped her forehead. "I know, miser." "Grandmother." Mu Xiaolu jumped onto the soft couch and hugged her waist. "Why do I have to leave Jiang? I don't want to leave grandmother. Can I not attend Uncle Wang's birthday banquet?" "Nonsense." Mu Hongjin said, "How can you not go? You're the future princess. Only you can represent Jiang." I don't want to go. The little girl acted shamelessly. How would I know what Uncle Wang looks like? How would I know if he is easy to get along with? What if he is very fierce? You won't. They will all treat you very well. Mu Hongjin patted her head. Her tone was gentle but a little strict. Xiaolu, you are not a child anymore. Grandmother can't accompany you forever. One day, you will have to take charge of many things by yourself. Grandmother can only be at ease when I see you grow up. I have to grow up slowly. Mu Xiaolu was puzzled. I am not a bamboo shoot at the mountain pass that will break through the soil overnight. Mu Hongjin was amused by her words. After laughing, her eyes were dyed with a layer of worry. There was no time. Yuta was hiding in the dark and had already made a move in the past few days. She had to send Mu Xiaolu out. Mu Xiaolu was the last hope of Jiang City. She had also prepared for the worst. It was a pity that she could not watch the little girl grow up and become her indestructible protection before she became an adult. But why were there so many regrets in the world? Chapter 151. Mu Xiaolu snuggled up to Mu Hongjin and chatted for a while before she was called away by Aunt Tong. The maid beside her helped Mu Hongjin to stand up. She took a few steps forward and walked to the painted wall with the murals. The hall was spacious and deserted. The only lively place was the painted wall. The market was crowded and the canal flowed. All the liveliness of Jiang City was painted on the wall. Everyone's faces were filled with joy and happiness. She hadn't seen this kind of liveliness for many years. After all, ever since she became the princess, the place she spent the most time in was this empty prince's mansion. Mu Xiaolu would be sent out of the city after today. The so-called Uncle Wang's birthday banquet was just a pretense. The vassals had not interacted with each other for many years. To avoid arousing His Majesty's suspicion, everyone settled down and the world was peaceful. Now that Yuta was hiding in the dark, a storm was brewing in Jiang. As the princess, she couldn't escape. She had to stay in the city and live and die with the people who couldn't escape. This was the Mu family's strength of character. However, Mu Xiaolu couldn't stay. She was Jiang's only hope. If the worst happened and only Mu Xiaolu survived, there was still hope. The lords have already ordered the evacuation of the people. The maid said softly, "Is your highness worried about the young highness?" Mu Hongjin smiled and shook her head. "I'm worried about Jiang City." The willow tree outside the window had long branches that were soaked in the green of spring. It stretched to the edge of the pond and created small ripples. The carps in the pond fought to be the first to peck at it. It was the same every spring. The only thing that changed was the people. When Mu Hongjin was young, she liked life outside the prince's mansion. As the youngest daughter of King Mengji, when her brother was still alive, she was pampered like the innocent pearl in the palms of all the wealthy families in Jiang. She lived a warm and lovely life. However, after her brother passed away when she was 16, her life changed. King Mengji started to make her learn many things and set many rules. At that time, Mu Hongjin truly understood how hard her brother's life was. However, it was hard work. King Mengji didn't have any other children. As the person who would bear the responsibility of the entire prince's mansion in the future, it was understandable that he suffered. However, Mu Hongjin found it hard to accept that even her marriage was controlled by someone else. Now that he thought about it, she was used to being spoiled at that time. She was young and impetuous, so she actually dared to leave. She did not realize at all that if she left her father alone in the prince's mansion, how would she deal with the ministers of the imperial court who would break off their engagement? If it was the current Mu Hongjin, she would not have such courage. The more he took on, the less freedom he would have as his self. The courage to risk everything would only come once in a lifetime. After that age, after that time, it would never come again. Together with his younger self, they disappeared into the long river of time. Mu Hongjin really liked Lu Buwang at first. The young man in white had a cold and cheerless temperament. He was upright and self-restrained, but sometimes he was naive and unsophisticated. He clearly had amazing skills and outstanding skills, but he could seriously find a sheep for a farmer and not complain at all. But Mu Hongjin thought that these so-called advantages, such as kindness and innocence, were all additional. She liked Lu Buwang. At the beginning, when Lu Buwang stood in front of her with a sword under the peach blossom tree and drove away those bad guys for her, it had started. The hero saved the beauty. In the legendary stories, many happy marriages had been created. She was determined to follow Lu Buwang. She acted shamelessly, cried, coaxed, and lied to him. She used all kinds of tricks on him. Unfortunately, Lu Buwang had always been cold and polite to her, and she didn't see any favor from him. Mu Hongjin was a little discouraged, but on second thought, compared to others, Lu Buwang was already good to her. He earned little money, but when they ate in the restaurant, he would order a plate of apricot cake for her. When they lived in the inn, he would spend more money to add a thicker mattress for her. He put the money in a conspicuous place and turned a blind eye to her secretly taking some money to buy rouge. If it weren't for the fact that he didn't have a good impression of her, he wouldn't have tolerated her to this extent. Therefore, Mu Hongjin always felt that with one more step and a little more time, Lu Buwang would fall in love with her sooner or later. Until Lu Buwang's junior sister came down the mountain to find him. The junior sister was called Yushu. She was different from the shrewish women in Jiang. She looked so weak as if a gust of wind could blow her away. Her skin was as white as a porcelain doll, like a child under the goddess of mercy. She was ethereal and spoke softly, which made people feel tender affection for her. But Mu Hongjin could see a hint of hostility in the girl's eyes. At that time, she was careless and didn't realize anything. When she heard that Yushu was the daughter of Taoist Yunji, she specially came down the mountain because she was afraid that Lu Buwang couldn't deal with the worldly affairs at the foot of the mountain, so she came to help him. Therefore, she had a good impression of her and treated her as a younger sister. Mu Hongjin didn't think it was a bad thing that two people became three people. Yushu was always obedient. Unlike her, she never caused trouble for Lu Buwang. More than a month passed in a flash. When it was time for Lu Buwang to return to Chiyun Mountain, he originally planned to take Mu Hongjin up the mountain with him. But who knew that both inside and outside Jiang City were investigating the missing Little Highness? The officers and soldiers were checking one by one, even at the foot of Chiyun Mountain. Mu Hongjin couldn't go up Chiyun Mountain. She pulled Lu Buwang into the room, looked at him seriously, and said, "I can't go back with you." The young man thought that she was playing tricks again, so he asked, "Why?" "Let me tell you." Mu Hongjin hesitated for a moment and told him the truth. "I'm the daughter of King Mingji. I'm the person the officers and soldiers in and outside the city are looking for." Lu Buwang was stunned. "My father wants to marry me to the son of an imperial court official to stabilize his position as a vassal. I don't want to, so I escaped. I didn't expect to meet you. I've been very happy this month." Lu Buwang. She didn't call him young hero, but directly called him by his name. "I don't want to marry him, but I can't go up the mountain with you. What should I do?" The girl was no longer as lively and mischievous as before. She looked at him quietly with complete trust in her eyes. Perhaps, there was also a little unknowingly dependence. Lu Buwang didn't know what to say. Perhaps he had long noticed that Mu Hongjin's identity was unusual. A noble girl living in King Mingji's mansion was somewhat different from a girl from an ordinary family in Jiang City. Lu Buwang thought for a long time and said to her, "In that case, wait for me in this inn. After I go up the mountain and tell my master about this, I'll go down the mountain to pick you up in 2 days and find a way to solve this matter." Mu Hongjin was a little reluctant. "Are you leaving now?" "I'll come back," the young man said uncomfortably. On the day he left, Mu Hongjin saw him off in the open space behind the inn. There was some uneasiness in her eyes, as if she had foreseen something. She couldn't help but grab Lu Buwang's sleeve and say to him, "Lu Buwang, remember what you said. You must come back. Don't worry." For the first and last time, he patted her head to comfort her. Lu Buwang and Yushu left, and Mu Hongjin waited for him in the inn obediently. She believed that Lu Buwang would definitely come back. Although Lu Buwang didn't like her yet, he was a man of his word. 2 days later, Lu Buwang didn't come back. Mu Hongjin was still waiting in the inn. She thought that maybe Lu Buwang was delayed by something on the way. It had rained for several days, and the mountain road was not easy to walk on. Maybe he couldn't go down the mountain immediately. Or maybe Taoist Yunji had something to tell him, and he couldn't come over until he finished it. Another 5 days passed, but Lu Buwang still didn't appear. Mu Hongjin began to feel a little anxious. The world was not peaceful. Could it be that he was robbed by bandits passing by? Although his swordsmanship was powerful, his heart was pure and kind. Even she could deceive him. How could he really fight against those insidious and dirty villains? On the 10th day, someone finally came to the inn. However, it wasn't Lu Buwang, but the soldiers. The head of the soldiers stood in front of her and said in a respectful and cold tone, "Your Highness, it's time to go home." Mu Hongjin was taken back to King Mingji's mansion. She was locked in the room. She banged on the window and shouted, "Let me out." No one answered. She began a hunger strike. Her father, King Mingji, ordered people to open the door. Mu Hongjin rushed to King Mingji and cried, "Father, how could you let them lock me up?" Hongjin, King Mingji shook his head and said with a smile. He put the dishes on the maid's tray in front of her. "These are your favorite snacks." "I don't want to eat." Mu Hongjin turned her head away. "I want to leave the mansion." King Mingji didn't get angry. After a moment of silence, he asked, "Are you waiting for that young man surnamed Lu?" Mu Hongjin suddenly raised her head, and her eyes couldn't hide her surprise. "How do you know?" "He won't come back." "No, he will come back." Mu Hongjin couldn't help but say, "He promised me, and he won't break his promise." "Really?" King Mingji said lightly, "How do you think I found your whereabouts?" Mu Hongjin was stunned. The cruel words from her father's mouth instantly shattered the beautiful dream she had been deceiving herself. "It was he who told me where you were. He sent you back with his own hands." Why did Lu Buwang send her back to the mansion? Mu Hongjin didn't understand this question until later. She didn't want to believe King Mingji's words, but Lu Buwang seemed to have really disappeared from her life and never appeared again. Mu Hongjin gradually believed it later on. If such a person really wanted to inquire about a person, how could he not find a way? She had persisted for more than half a year, and she really couldn't hold on anymore. Half a year later, Mu Hongjin got married to the son of an important official in the court. Although she was married, she was called Prince Wang. The position of Prince Wang was stable, but the heir she gave birth to still took the surname Mu. Prince Wang was not as bad as Mu Hongjin said before, but he was not very outstanding either. The two lived a respectful life. When her husband took a concubine, she gladly accepted it. She was not jealous or jealous. Prince Wang also had a sense of propriety and treated her with respect. In the eyes of outsiders, this was the most beautiful marriage in the blind and mute marriage. However, Mu Hongjin felt that her liveliness and vitality had long since disappeared on that spring day like an epiphyllum that bloomed quickly and withered quickly. She always felt that her heart was empty, and she didn't know what she wanted. Therefore, she could only spend more time on the official affairs in Jiang City. A red carp jumped out of the water and stirred up the spring water. After a while, its red tail touched the surface of the water and quickly disappeared. Mu Hongjin stared at the water in a daze. She told He Yen that Lu Buwang didn't come to the inn to fulfill their agreement, and the two of them never saw each other again. In fact, she lied. After that, she actually met Lu Buwang again, but that meeting was really not a pleasant one. It was the second year after she gave birth to the child. She took her youngest son and Prince Wang to the treasure temple in Jiang City to pray for blessings. The Buddha statue Niao Niao, and the sound of Sanskrit spread far and wide. She prayed for her youngest son to grow up safely and healthily. She prayed for good weather in Jiang City and for the people to be happy. After praying for blessings, when she was about to leave, she saw that there seemed to be someone peeping outside the temple. Mu Hongjin ordered someone to go over, and the guard caught a young woman and brought her over. Years had passed since they parted, but that woman was still as weak and obedient as when they first met. She looked at Mu Hongjin with some fear and panic in her eyes. Mu Hongjin was stunned. It was Yushu. She subconsciously wanted to look for Lu Buwang. Since Yushu was here, Lu Buwang might also be here. However, Yushu seemed to know what she was thinking and blurted out, "He's not here." Mu Hongjin looked at her and smiled meaningfully. Time would make a woman grow up quickly. Mu Hongjin was no longer the careless and silly girl who couldn't even distinguish her love rival. Of course, she understood where the hostility in the girl's eyes came from in the past, but Mu Hongjin had never regarded her as an opponent. She tilted her head, squatted down, and stared at Yushu's face with interest. "It doesn't matter if he's not here. After I catch you, he will naturally appear." Yushu's expression changed greatly. Mu Hongjin stood up with a cold expression. "Just say that a female assassin appeared in the temple and intended to assassinate me. The guard has already caught her." There was a red shadow at the corner of her eyes, which was exquisite and gorgeous. She was no longer the innocent girl with clear eyes. Mu Hongjin didn't return to the prince's mansion. She stayed in the temple and sent away all the guards and servants. She asked her husband to leave with her youngest son and waited for that person to appear alone. In the middle of the night, that person really appeared. After parting for many years, he seemed to have lost the innocence of his youth and became even more cold and unfamiliar. The first thing he said when he saw Mu Hongjin was not to ask her how she had been all these years, but to ask, "Where is Yushu?" He was emotionless, as if the two of them had always been unrelated strangers. Mu Hongjin lowered her head and wanted to laugh. She almost suspected that those days in the spring outside Jiang City were just her own imagination. She regarded Lu Buwang as a hero who suddenly appeared in her life, and Lu Buwang saw her as an accident that he didn't want to see. In prison. Her voice was also cold. Lu Buwang looked at her. He had changed a lot, and she was so unfamiliar with him. The girl in his memory was completely different from the girl in front of him, who was wearing a red robe and a golden crown and had a cold and arrogant expression. "It's impossible for Yushu to assassinate you." "Why not?" Mu Hongjin laughed sarcastically. "You can't judge a book by its cover. Besides, I don't know her. Let her go." Lu Buwang said, "Catch me." The way he looked at her was cold and emotionless, and there was no longer the helpless doting or annoying concession in the past. There was only the calmness of a stranger, and perhaps a little disgust for the bigwigs. How ridiculous! Mu Hongjin took a step forward and just looked into his eyes. "She's just your junior sister. Why are you so protective of her? Do you like her?" She was just testing him. Mu Hongjin didn't know what she was expecting. Perhaps she was expecting him to deny it quickly, then look at her and say, "You're the only one in my heart." What a vulgar scene. Mu Hongjin would spit in disgust when she saw it in the past, but now she was looking forward to hearing it from his mouth. Unfortunately, a story was a story, and a legend was a fictional story. The love and infatuation in the world only increased resentment in the end. How many lovers turned against each other and how many couples disappeared? Lu Buwang said, "Yes." She said, "What did you say?" "I like her." The young man's voice was calm and direct. For a moment, Mu Hongjin felt that her fingers were trembling. Once upon a time, she also wanted to hear this sentence from Lu Buwang's mouth. For this sentence, she had used all kinds of tricks. Lu Buwang's mouth was very tight. She repeatedly got angry and felt that this person's mouth was made of sure too, and she couldn't pry it open no matter what. Now he said it so easily. It turned out that it wasn't that she couldn't pry it open, but that the person talking to him wasn't her. She felt more and more ridiculous, and all the things that happened back then flashed through her mind one by one. When she was a carefree girl, she didn't see Yushu's feelings for Lu Buwang. When she was the princess of Mengji, she saw it, but she didn't take Yushu seriously. It turned out that they were in love with each other, and she was the one who was overestimating herself. What was the use of being the princess of Mengji? In love, she lost completely and didn't even have a chance to compete with him. And she had been thinking about him for so many years. "Back then, were you the one who told my father about what happened at the inn?" she asked. Lu Buwang said, "Yes." "When you left back then, did you never think of coming back?" "Yes." Mu Hongjin took a deep breath, as if she wanted to see it more clearly and feel the pain more thoroughly. She wanted to uproot something in the bottom of her heart and never look at it again. She asked, "Lu Buwang, have you never had feelings for me?" Lu Buwang's beautiful eyes stared at her, and his expression was as indifferent as a passerby's. He only said one word, "Yes." "I see," she murmured, and her eyes were a little hot, but she still raised the corners of her mouth and said, "Since you only love your junior sister, then you are willing to do anything for your junior sister?" Lu Buwang looked at her. "What do you want to do?" Mu Hongjin's fingers stroked his shoulder little by little, and her tone was ambiguous and frivolous. "If you become my lover, I will let her go." Lu Buwang was very calm from the beginning to the end, and his expression didn't change. Only at this moment, as if he had been stung by something, he quickly took a step back and avoided Mu Hongjin's touch. Mu Hongjin's body stiffened, and the corners of her mouth curled up mockingly. Her tone was deliberately contemptuous. "What, you don't want to? It's not everyone's good fortune to be the princess's lover." Lu Buwang stared at her. His white clothes were spotless, and the sword at his waist was shining. He was as noble as the first time they met. It was impossible for such an elegant person to accept such humiliation. She just wanted to humiliate him. Why did she take it to heart for so many years, but he could pretend that it didn't happen at all? What Lu Buwang couldn't do for her, he definitely couldn't do for Yushu. Otherwise, what would she, Mu Hongjin, become? A touchstone to prove their true love? Then she saw Lu Buwang slowly kneel down in the dim temple hall and answer calmly, "Okay." Mu Hongjin's heart suddenly ached, and she almost couldn't breathe. What else did he want to prove? Enough, this was enough. She had asked clearly. Those doubts that had troubled her for many years and the results that she couldn't get, no matter whether they were good or bad, happy or sad, had all been answered. The women of Jiang dared to love and hate, and they were able to let go. The princess also had her own pride. She had the entire Jiang city, so why would she risk her life for a man? It was just an ill-fated relationship. She raised her chin and said coldly, "But I'm not willing. How can a person like you stand by my side?" Every word she said was like a knife cutting her heart. Even Mu Hongjin herself was surprised. It had only been a month, but why did she have such deep feelings for Lu Buwang? When she personally cut off this ill-fated relationship, she actually felt so reluctant to part with him. "Take your sweetheart and get out of Jiang City," she said. "Thank you, Your Highness." His voice was as calm as ever, and Mu Hongjin's tears fell in the darkness. "You and I will go our separate ways. Lu Buwang, from now on, you and your little junior sister can never enter Jiang City. Otherwise, I will kill you every time I see you." The corners of the red robe drew a bright and brilliant ray of light in the dark night. It was like a clear boundary, indicating that the two of them would have nothing to do with each other from now on. It was also like the petals under the peach blossom tree when they first met. They spread all over the ground, dazzling people and making them lose themselves in spring dreams, unwilling to wake up. But there was always a time when one would wake up from a dream. She let Yushu go and returned to the prince's mansion, as if nothing had happened. She and the prince's husband were still in harmony, and the years were peaceful. However, even though they were married, it was still hard to calm down. A few years later, Prince Mengji passed away. Mu Hongjin gradually began to get busy. A few years later, the prince's husband also passed away, so she spent all her energy on her youngest son. Later, her son also passed away, leaving only Mu Xiaolu and her to rely on each other. Mu Xiaolu was very much like her when she was young. So she always doted on Mu Xiaolu, just like how her father doted on her when her brother was still alive. Mu Hongjin knew very well that once she took the position of the princess, the bright little girl who would sneak out of the mansion to play secretly would disappear one day. So before she disappeared, she wanted to take care of her and keep her alive for a while longer. She hoped that Mu Xiaolu could have her own story, and not be like her, who had wasted many years in vain in someone else's story. The apricot flowers on the branches bloomed in a lively and dense manner. The girls in the garden mistakenly entered the depths of the forest flowers and had a long and beautiful dream. This beautiful dream contained both happiness and sadness, but in the blink of an eye, it seemed like a lifetime had passed. Her spring day had died a long time ago. Perhaps it had never come. Chapter 152. The evacuation of the citizens of Jiang City and Xiaoju's takeover of Jiang City's army were carried out almost at the same time. The citizens would not disobey the orders given by the princess herself. No matter how puzzled and confused they would leave temporarily to protect their families' lives when they heard that the city was in turmoil. The only ones who did not leave were the old, weak, sick, and disabled who could not travel long distances. They were unable to move for various reasons and did not want to wander around on the road. They would rather die in their hometown. The most difficult ones were probably some of the aristocratic families in Jiang City. They were displeased with Mu Hongjin over the years and secretly had disloyal thoughts. However, Mu Hongjin had always been swift and decisive. Although she was a woman, she had always forcefully suppressed all voices of opposition. However, this time, the crisis in Jiang City was menacing. Mu Hongjin was unable to do many things at once. These aristocratic families were eager to take advantage of this opportunity to make some moves. Mu Hongjin could not leave Jiang City. Once she left, not only would she give a chance to those who secretly opposed her, but it would also mean that she had given up on the city and the citizens of the city. As the princess of Jiang City, she enjoyed the love and respect of the citizens. At this time, she should take responsibility. A disguised, inconspicuous carriage secretly left the gate of the prince's residence. Mu Hongjin, who was dressed as a maid, stood at the gate of the prince's residence. Half of her body was hidden behind a pillar as she looked in the direction Mu Xiaolu left. Mu Xiaolu did not know about the crisis in Jiang City. She naively thought that she was leaving to attend the king's birthday celebration in her grandmother's place. When she left, she was very happy and said that she wanted to bring a gift for Mu Hongjin. When she came back, it would be summer. She even wanted Mu Hongjin to accompany her to make sweet ice cream. Mu Hongjin only withdrew her gaze when she could no longer see the back of the carriage. Just as she was about to turn around and enter the residence, she glanced and seemed to see a man in white standing opposite her. She could not help but stop and look over. It was a man dressed in white. His face could not be seen clearly. He was hiding in the courtyard across the street. Sunlight shone down from the roof, casting a large shadow. He stood in the shadow, and his face could not be seen clearly. Only a long sword hung at his waist and a zither on his back could be seen clearly. On the wide street, the flow of people was turbulent. Among the people coming and going, he raised his head slightly. He seemed to be looking at her through the crowd, but also seemed like he was not looking at her. A horse-drawn carriage carrying goods slowly passed by. When Mu Hongjin looked up again, there was only the dazzling sun. There was no one on the other side of the street, as if it was just her imagination. She stood there quietly for a moment, then walked away. At night, the oil lamp in the Chui residence's study room was still lit. Large lanterns were placed in the four corners of the room, illuminating the room. Chui Yueji's study room was more like an armory than a study room. The room was cold and cheerless and square. Apart from a few scrolls that were randomly piled on the table and a black wooden shelf with books on it, there was nothing elegant about the room at all. However, he was not a person who liked to read. There was a map hanging on the wall. The map was huge and took up half of the wall. A river was drawn in the middle, and the whirlpools and reefs near the river were clearly drawn. There were more than 10 people sitting in the room. They were all martial artists like Chui Yu. They were all Chui Yueji's colleagues and subordinates. If Yudo entered the city this time, these people would be the deputy leaders of Jiang City's army and cooperate with Xiaoju. He Yen and Xiaoju sat on one side, while Fei Nu and Qi Wu stood behind them with their arms crossed. Chui Yueji held a charcoal pencil and drew a circle on a conspicuous place on the map. This is the most suitable place to go ashore in the canal. Chui Yueji pointed at the place he drew. If we go ashore from here, the two armies will fight here. This place is flat and suitable for Jiang City's army. However, he glanced at Xiaoju and felt a little guilty. We don't have enough men and horses. Jiang City did not have many soldiers and horses. Emperor Wenxian would not allow such a thing to happen. In the past, many vassal kings and generals disbanded in order to protect themselves. Mu Hongjin was the same. Emperor Wenxian was especially merciful to leave behind less than 20,000 soldiers of Jiang City. With 20,000 soldiers and horses, it was not enough to rebel and set off a big wave. Similarly, it was not enough for the Yudo to resist tens of thousands of murderous soldiers. Cui Yuezhi also understood this point. Even the cleverest housewife could not cook without rice. Even if they had General Feng Yun, who was a brave soldier, they did not even have soldiers. How could he fight with others? With his face? It's not that we don't have enough men and horses. Xiao Ju looked at the map and said calmly, it's that we don't have enough ships. Ships? One of Cui Yuezhi's subordinates looked at him in confusion. It was not their fault. Jiang City had been peaceful for so many years. Other than Cui Yuezhi and the others who were older, the younger ones had not even been to a real battlefield. Xiao Ju tapped the teacup in front of him with his finger and said, "You tell me." He Yan, me. Cui Yuezhi and the rest of his subordinates looked at He Yan. He Yan had now changed back to his female disguise. Everyone present had heard about how he defeated Mu Yi in the martial arts arena today. However, the only thing a female subordinate with outstanding skills could do was to protect her master's safety. More importantly, she could kill a few people on the battlefield. Arranging troops and formations and analyzing battle reports were not things that ordinary people could do. Moreover, men were probably born with a sense of superiority over women in terms of military affairs. Thus, they were somewhat mischievous towards Xiao Ju's actions. They thought that the rumors were not completely true. Everyone said that General Feng Yun was cold and heartless and did not get close to women. It turned out that it was all fake. Now, he was blinded by lust and allowed this female subordinate who had a close relationship with him to fool around. For a moment, everyone looked at Xiao Ju as if they were looking at an incapable ruler who had been bewitched by a vixen's concubine. All these years, He Yan had long seen the gazes of men who looked down on women countless times. He wanted to teach these people a lesson. After thinking about it, he did not refuse. He stood up and walked to the map with a smile. Cui Yuezhi returned to his seat. The rest of the people looked at He Yan with an expression that said, "Let's see what nonsense she is going to spout." He Yan did not look at the map. He only looked at the crowd and said, "These are not important." Everyone did not understand. There is no other way to fight on the water. Big boats beat small boats, big guns beat small guns, many boats beat few boats, many guns beat few guns. You are small boats and small guns, few boats and few guns. No matter how you look at it, where you go ashore and how you arrange your troops are not the most important. In the way, except for the imperial guards, firearms are prohibited. They only talk about boats. As long as the Yudo has enough boats, they can win. If you want to win a battle with fewer people, you can't do without boats. On the water, they have more boats. On the shore, they have more people. This map is not used in this way. Although the people present hadn't fought in the past few years, they weren't fools. Whether He Yan was spouting nonsense or not, they were well aware of it. She hit the nail on the head and pointed out the crux of the problem. For a moment, everyone's contempt disappeared. "Miss He," Cui Yuezhi said, "but you also know that in these years, His Majesty has prohibited the privately raising of troops, let alone soldiers and boats. The ships on the canal are originally used to transport goods or carry people on long journeys. Jiang City would never dare to build its own navy, much less use firearms." He Yan sighed in her heart. She naturally knew this. After all, the previous dynasty had a rebellion. After the previous emperor succeeded the throne, he paid special attention to reducing the power of the vassals. The current vassals were actually the same as the nobles with no real power in Shuo City. "Dare I ask Military Governor Xiao?" One of Cui Yuezhi's subordinates looked at Xiao Ju and carefully asked, "How many soldiers does Yudo have?" Xiao Ju, 100,000 more and not less. Everyone sucked in a breath of cold air. With such a difference in military strength, it was difficult for them to have any hope. The people in the city have already been evacuated by His Highness. They left through the city gates. one of the deputy soldiers said with a dry voice. We will try our best to delay for more time. The meaning of his words was that everyone was prepared to sacrifice themselves. The people who evacuated from the city, as well as His Highness, were the seeds of hope. The only thing they could do was to buy more time for the people. It was only a matter of time before the city was captured. Xiao Ju's gaze lightly swept across everyone. She sat up slightly and was about to speak when suddenly, a woman's clear voice sounded. It is not a good thing that the morale is so low. You must know that we have a famous general here. Do you know what a famous general is? Everyone was stunned. You will not lose a battle that you should not lose, and you will have a chance to win a battle that you should not win. This is what a famous general is. He Yen raised his eyebrows. It seems like we will lose without a doubt. Even a famous general can find a breakthrough and turn defeat into victory. There is a famous general here who can turn the situation around with his own strength. How do you expect him to face himself like this? She thought that there was not only one famous general here, but a pair. 2 famous generals from Dawei were here. If they lost, they would not be able to face others. No one knew her background. They only looked at Xiao Ju and thought that Xiao Ju's subordinates really did not spare any effort to flatter him. They even believed that Xiao Ju could turn defeat into victory in such a terrible chess game. How much did they worship him? Cui Yuezhi was silent for a moment and asked Xiao Ju, "Then Military Governor Xiao, how should we turn defeat into victory?" The world did not know that Xiao Ju had won the Battle of Water with a small number of troops. After all, to outsiders, Xiao Ju had led 100,000 soldiers from the southern prefecture to victory in Gua City. However, at that time, they were pouring water into the city. They were attacking the city, not defending it. Moreover, the environment of Jiang and Gua City was different. Jiang was a water city. Although they were both attacked by water, the difference was like heaven and earth. Xiao Ju leaned back in his chair. The joints of his left hand were slightly protruding as he touched the tea lid. He looked at He Yen, his beautiful eyes filled with deep emotions, and said, "You tell me." He Yen frowned slightly. He said, "You have fought with the Yuto before. You know the Yudo's methods better than anyone else." The Yudo's methods were crude and direct. This was related to their style of doing things. They had been hiding in the dark for so many years, probing and harassing from time to time. They were both arrogant and inferior. This time, they had planned for a long time and had chosen Jiang as their first battle. They would definitely make this battle a grand one. He Yen said, "Water counters fire. Water and fire are incompatible. Why don't we use fire to attack?" For a moment, no one spoke in the study. "Miss He, please explain more clearly," Cui Yu said. Cui Yu's attitude towards He Yen became more and more respectful. He felt that this girl was very different from other girls. She was also very different from Xiao Ju's other subordinates. For example, Fei Nu and Qi Wu were also Xiao Ju's subordinates. However, they only listened to Xiao Ju's orders. Xiao Ju would not let them express their opinions like this. He Yen had always been very respectful towards Xiao Ju, but if one looked carefully, it did not seem like a relationship between a superior and a subordinate. Cui Yu was a big-hearted person. He could not tell if He Yen loved him or not. However, he could feel that He Yen regarded him as the same as Xiao Ju. If she were a man, she would probably be more like a good friend to Xiao Ju than a master and servant. The Yudo's boat might be very big. At least, it won't be like the small boats in Jiang City's army that transport goods or people. The Yudo kingdom is far away on land and there is no sea around it. It seems that they are not as good at water as the people in Jiang City. I think that the biggest possibility is that they will take a big boat to the edge of Jiang City. They will go ashore at the place Cui Zhongqi pointed out. She pointed at the place Cui Yu had marked. If their boats are very close to each other, we can use fire to attack. Once the fire spreads, the small boats in Jiang will be able to quickly leave, but the Yudo's big boat will not. We can take this opportunity to eliminate the Yudo's main force. Using fire to attack on the water was a method that no one had tried before. For a moment, no one said anything, but He Yan's words made everyone suddenly see the light. Their hearts faintly stirred up, secretly thinking about the feasibility of this plan. The Yudo's military strength is much greater than ours. They also know that Jiang has been peaceful for many years and is not a match for the Yudo. They must be proud and short-sighted. This is their weakness, but it is our strength. When she spoke, her voice was gentle and firm, clear and organized. Every word seemed to be able to give people endless confidence. Just now, everyone thought that they would definitely lose this battle, but after hearing her words, they felt that they might be able to create a battle in the history books where they won the battle with a small number of people. This battle would be admired by the world. It was just that. Cui Yuji looked at He Yan doubtfully. In such a short period of time, she had thought of a way to deal with it. Although it wasn't flawless, it was unique and pointed out the key to victory or defeat. Could an ordinary woman really do this? Not to mention a woman, even a man who had been in the army for many years might not be able to react so quickly. After all, a general not only needed experience, but also a little talent and a unique vision. However, how old did He Yan look? He heard that she was only 17. A 17-year-old girl was already so powerful? Xiao Ju's subordinates were already so powerful. Wouldn't the Nine Flags barracks be filled with crouching tigers and hidden dragons? Cui Yuji felt a faint chill in his heart. I'm just suggesting this idea, He Yan said. I'm not sure if it can be implemented or how it can be implemented. He Yan knew that he had said too much, so he consciously passed the words to Xiao Ju. Whether this plan will work or not, it depends on the commander-in-chief's decision. She did not need to say this, but it was the responsibility of every general to treat every battle seriously. Moreover, Jiang City was a good place, and the people were very warm and honest. She was not willing to let this beautiful place, which was like a paradise, be destroyed by the Yudo. After all, if the Yudo took over Jiang, they would only go all the way north, and the people of Dawei would suffer. She would fight until the end. Everyone looked at Xiao Ju. Xiao Ju's gaze swept past He Yan. She stood up and walked to He Yan's side. He Yan lowered his head, avoided Xiao Ju's thoughtful gaze, and returned to his position. He picked up the charcoal pencil that Cui Yueji had put aside and circled it in front of the mark that Cui Yueji had just made. He then made a new mark. The new mark was in front of the old one, which was also in front of the shore of Jiang City. There was a narrow exit. This was the place where the canal and the river in Jiang City met. It was like the mouth of a gourd, sharp and thin. Only after passing through the mouth of the gourd could they reach the real canal. Fire attack is feasible, but we can set up an ambush here. This passage is narrow, so large ships cannot enter. Small boats can pass through it. Cui Yueji's eyes lit up. Xiao Ju had sharp eyes. This place was very suitable for an ambush. As for fire attack, Xiao Ju said, it depends on the wind direction and the terrain. There are people from the Directorate of Astronomy in the city who are in charge of observing the weather and wind direction. A Jiang soldier said, they can be used to make arrangements for the planting of paddy fields in the farms. Another person asked hesitantly, but what if the wind direction is opposite on that day? Then we can't use fire attack. Xiao Ju said, after all, war is about the right time, the right place, and the right people. He Yan thought to himself, that's true. Everything is indispensable. Of course, Xiao Ju did not finish his sentence. If the wind direction was opposite on that day, there would naturally be other ways. However, when it came to war, it was all about luck. If God did not let you win, there would be many examples of failure on the verge of success in the history books. What they needed to do was to minimize the possibility of these uncertainties. The discussion on the water attack lasted until midnight before the crowd finally dispersed. At first, everyone was listless and disappointed. Later on, they were full of energy and high spirits. It was all because of the ridiculous idea that He Yan came up with. Lin Shuanghe saw that the group of people's expressions were very different from when they first came out. He asked them in surprise, what happened? What did you do inside? Why are they so happy? He Yan yawned. Of course, we used reason and emotion to persuade them. That's not necessary, Lin Shuanghe muttered. If I didn't know better, I would have thought that you guys were drinking wine inside. He Yen was speechless. She said, "It's getting late. I'm going to rest first. If there's anything else, we can talk about it tomorrow." Lin Shuanghe nodded. "Okay." He Yen returned to her room. During the day, she was correcting the formation of Jiang City's army in the training field. At night, she was discussing the map. She was already very tired. After she washed up, she walked out and saw Xiao Ju still sitting at the table in the inner room. He was writing something with a brush. He Yen went over to take a look. He had somehow obtained a copy of the map that Cui Yuezhi had hung on the wall of the study room. However, it was a smaller copy. He put the copy of the Yudo's defense map that Chu Zhao had given to Mu Hongjin and compared it with something. What he wrote was what He Yen had just mentioned. It was about the various aspects that they might need to pay attention to when attacking with fire. For example, how many ambushes should be set at the mouth of the calabash, the direction of the wind on that day, the arrangement of the city gates, and the guards in the city. Because there were too few soldiers in Jiang City, they had to be extremely cautious even if they had to arrange a soldier. She was simply like a little wife who lived frugally to manage the family. He Yen said, "Commander-in-Chief, why aren't you sleeping?" "Go ahead." Xiao Ju didn't even raise his head. He Yen sighed in his heart. He thought to himself that one only needed to be talented to get first place when they were young. Even if they slept in class, they could still get first place. However, maintaining first place for many years was not something that could be done with talent alone. Back when she was in the Fuyue army, she was also like this. She had even seen the moon in the middle of the night from 1 to 3 in the morning. Thinking of this, she said, "Commander-in-Chief, let me help you." As she spoke, someone knocked on the door outside. It was Lu Buwang. "He, are you asleep?" It was already so late. Why was Lu Buwang still looking for her? He Yen and Xiao Ju looked at each other and said, "No, master, please wait a moment." She put on an outer robe and opened the door. Lu Buwang was standing outside the door. He had just returned from outside the residence, and his clothes were still covered with the cold dew of the night. He Yen looked outside the door and said, "Come in and talk." Lu Buwang entered the door and saw Xiao Ju. He nodded slightly to Xiao Ju as a greeting. His gaze fell on the scroll in front of Xiao Ju. He paused for a moment and then said, "Commander-in-Chief, do you have a way to deal with the Battle of Jiang?" He Yen said, "A little bit." "What are the chances of winning?" He Yen said, "At most 50%. It would be best if it was 50%. Lu Buwang was silent for a moment and said, "The Yuto may take action soon." Xiao Ju looked at him and asked, "Master Lu, what have you found?" "The Yudo I've been tracking have already gone in one direction. Some of them went out of the city, and some of them disappeared. They have noticed my whereabouts. The news of Her Highness evacuating the people can't be kept a secret." Lu Buwang said, "The Yudo's ship hasn't arrived yet. We have to race against time now. In the shortest time possible, the people of Jiang should evacuate as far as possible, but there are civilians in the city who can't leave." Lu Buwang's voice sank. He didn't want the civilians to be slaughtered by the Yudo. "Master," He Yen said, "don't you know how to do divination? Have you ever divined whether this battle will be won or lost?" "No solution." He Yen asked, "No solution?" In fact, many years ago, when Lu Buwang was still a teenager, he had divined the opportunities of Jiang City in the next few decades on the mountain. The divination showed that decades later, there would be a great disaster in the city. Corpses would be piled up, and there wouldn't be any chickens or dogs left. Even Dewei was the same. Wang Chao's fate was about to end. He wanted to continue divining, but Taoist Yun Ji, who happened to see it, smashed the tortoise shell with his palm and reprimanded him. "The heavenly Tao is unpredictable. How can you peek into the heavenly Tao?" The matter was left unsettled. Many things happened later. He also knew that the affairs of the world were unpredictable. Compared to the heavenly Tao, human strength was too insignificant. Lu Buwang hadn't divined for many years. However, ever since he met He Yen this time, he knew that there might be a war in Jiang City and that the Yudo didn't come with good intentions. In the end, he couldn't stay out of it, so he secretly divined again. divinations could never see the cause and process. They could only see the ending. He still remembered the result of the divination many years ago. However, decades later, the divinations were completely different. This was originally a dead end, and there was no chance of survival. However, he still saw the same scene as back then, but in the picture, there was an additional pair of blurry shadows. The shadows were golden and seemed to have infinite merit. They were as panicked as the sky, and like two bright golden lights, they illuminated the dead divinations. A dead end became an unknown because of this pair of blurry shadows. He couldn't see the ending. Chapter 153. If he couldn't see the outcome, it meant that it wasn't completely hopeless. As for the person who changed the outcome with his own strength, Lu Buwang didn't know who he was either. There was a rule in the sect that divination could only ask about things, not people. It was because of the saying, man can conquer nature. People who weren't completely controlled by the Tao of heaven. We have the geographical advantage. The mouth of Jiang City is our natural advantage. Moreover, those Jiang City soldiers grew up by the water and are good at swimming. In terms of manpower, now that we're here, we'll try our best to avoid mistakes. The only difficulty now is actually the weather. He Yen looked at Lu Buwang and said, if the wind blows from the southeast that day, it will be our victory. If the wind blows from the northwest that day, even the heavens will stand on the side of the Wu. The direction of the wind determined whether they could use fire to attack, and fire was the most likely way to win. Military Governor Xiao. Lu Buwang looked at Xiao Ju. Even if the people in the city evacuate, if the Yudo attack in a few days, the city won't be able to defend, and the lives of the people in the city won't be guaranteed. Those people who have evacuated now will also be caught. Xiao Ju said, therefore, the later the Yudo attack, the better. If the Yudo attack soon, then the longer they defend the city, the better. You mean? Lu Buwang seemed to have sensed something. Now, we can only defend the city. Not only defend the city, He Yen said. If we want to take the initiative to attack, we can only use fire. In this battle, it was not only the generals and soldiers, but also the blessings and luck of the heavens. I understand. Lu Buwang said, I'll think of another way. Commander-in-Chief, you should also prepare in advance. He looked worried. The Yudo will attack in 3 days at the latest. In fact, everyone understood that the so-called 3 days was already the best situation they estimated. In order to prevent too many people from evacuating the city, the Yudo would definitely send troops in a very short time. Both sides were simply fighting for time. That was what He Yen and the others thought, but what they didn't expect was that the Wutuo people were even more impatient than them. The next night, a loud horn sounded from the north of the canal, and thousands of large ships appeared above the canal, bringing with them the ferocious Wutuo people and long knives. The soldiers were at the city gates. Mu Hongjin sat in the middle of the hall. The servants around her all stood with their heads lowered. The atmosphere was heavy and stagnant. Only the woman was the same as before. She calmly ordered the servants beside her, let the soldiers at the entrance of the prince's mansion go to the city gate. Your Highness, if the city gate is lost, I won't live alone either. Instead of guarding the palace, it's better to guard the people. Mu Hongjin said calmly, I'm their princess, so it's only right. Her attitude was firm. The servant hesitated for a moment, but in the end he still did as she said. Mu Hongjin raised her eyes and looked at the painting of Jiang in spring on the wall. The bustling flower market and the lively crowd were so lively that it seemed like they would walk out of the painting in the next moment. The battle was about to start. The princess was as beautiful and arrogant as ever. She was calm and powerful without the slightest bit of panic. It was as if what happened outside was just a small disturbance that was not worth mentioning. As long as she listened to the zither and watched the dance, everything would be resolved. Father, the red-robed woman murmured in her heart. Your daughter has already guarded this city for more than 20 years, and will continue to do so in the future. The people of this city are so pure and kind. The water god will protect them. He will definitely get through this difficult time. Jiang City had not had a battle for many years. When the battle started, the old, weak, sick, and disabled in the city who could not leave in time all woke up from their dreams. They either sat quietly in their houses, waiting for the end to come, or crawled on the ground, silently praying for the Bodhisattva's protection. Cui Yuezhi changed into his armor and hung his long knife on his waist. He then left the mansion. There was no panic in the Cui mansion. Even the servants did things calmly. The few concubines did not play or laugh. They stood obediently in the room, waiting for orders. Concubine Wei said, "Do your own things. Master has not returned, so no one is allowed to speak carelessly." As Cui Yuezhi's family members, they could have left, but they chose to stay and advance and retreat with Cui Yuezhi. If the city was breached, these weak women would not be able to gain any advantage in the hands of Yudo. Therefore, everyone, including the third concubine, who loved to cry and frown the most, prepared a white silk cloth. Their lives belonged to them. Once the city was breached, they must not fall into the hands of Yudo. Cui Yuezhi left the mansion and rode to the martial arts fields camp. As soon as he arrived at the camp, he dismounted and saw a person walk out of the tent. It was Xiao Ju. After taking off the exquisite robe that he usually wore, this young man did not look like the noble young master of the capital. He wore a black armor robe and a pair of cloud-climbing boots. The armor shone with a cold light, adding to his majesty. He had a handsome appearance, but his aura was as sharp as a long knife. Like the sparkling sword on his waist, it was impossible to ignore its sharpness. Military Governor Xiao. Cui Yuezhi looked into the distance. Before long, the morning light would illuminate the sky of Jiang City. Yudo's ship would also arrive. It was a critical time. The Jiang army in the city is all here. I will lead a group of people to set up an ambush at the mouth of the gourd. Commander-in-Chief, lead the others to board the ship and fight head-on with the Jiang army. As for the fire, his expression became serious. The people from the Directorate of Astronomy had already observed the sky last night. There might be no wind today, or there might be a southeast wind. However, even if there was a wind, it would be in the afternoon. However, if it really was in the afternoon, Yudo might have already come ashore. The only thing they could do was to wait here for a possible southeast wind. For this possibility, they had to prolong the battle and try their best to delay the Yudo on the water. Xiao Ju led the Jiang army to complete this difficult task. However, this was not the only difficult task. There was also the person who set the fire. They had to secretly set fire on the Yudo's ship at the right time. With so many ships, it was impossible to set them on fire one by one. They had to observe the position of the ships and find the most important ones. Then, they had to use the fire on those ships to quickly spread the fire to all the Yudo ships. This required a good view of the overall situation, as well as good judgment. Looking at the entire Jiang city, it was rare to find someone who could do this. Cui Yuezhi was also in a difficult position, but he had no other choice. He could only wave his hand behind him. A group of people walked over. The leader was Mu Yi, who had fought with He Yen in the martial arts arena. I found a soldier and asked him to listen to Mu Yi's orders. We will find an opportunity to board the Yudo's ship. When the southeast wind arrives, we will take the opportunity to set fire. We can't be sure which ships can be controlled, so we can only ask Mu Yi to burn more. The more they burned, the higher the possibility of being discovered. It was even possible that they would be trapped on the ship. In a way, this soldier who set the fire was equivalent to the soldiers of the Vanguard Battalion. They were Vanguard Battalion soldiers who were ready to sacrifice themselves. They would use their sacrifice to pave the way for their brothers. Mu Yi said to Xiao Ju, "Mu Yi, do your best." Everyone now knew how unfavorable the situation was for the Jiang army. Mu Yi was no longer as arrogant as before. His expression was much more solemn. "Cui Zhongqi, leave the matter of setting fire to me." A voice cut in. The curtain was lifted and someone walked out. It was He Yen. She was also wearing the Jiang army's robes and her long hair was tied up high. She had bright eyes and white teeth. She gave off a completely different feeling from before. They did not know if it was an illusion, but everyone felt that this girl was more eye-catching when she was dressed like this. It was extremely natural. The armor was heavy, but she walked with ease. Her expression was also very calm. She looked at Xiao Ju and said, "Commander, let me set the fire." "Miss He." Mu Yi wanted to dissuade her. "It's very dangerous. There are too many Yudo ships. We might have to wait until the afternoon for the uncertain southeast wind." He Yan shook her head. To hide among them and not be discovered, you need not only skill, but also physical strength. You also need to know how to coordinate with the Jiang army led by the commander. Brother Mu Yi, you have never fought side by side with the commander before. Even if you set the fire, you two will not be able to get used to each other in a short period of time. I am the commander's subordinate, and I have a tacit understanding with him. It is best for me to lead you. She smiled faintly. Didn't you already fight with me in the martial arts arena? Why do you still have so little confidence in me? Mu Yi's face turned slightly red. He was momentarily speechless. Since he had lost to He Yan, it meant that his skills were inferior. How could he refute? He Yan's words were half true and half false. The truth was that she could indeed cooperate better with Xiao Ju. It was the same with Yuan Baozhen in Liangzhou City. Moreover, there were many ideas that could be thought through between generals. If Xiao Ju could think of it, so could she. At the same time, Xiao Ju could also understand her hint. If it was Mu Yi, he might not be able to understand. Secondly, she could also see that Mu Yi was determined to die and intended to exchange his life for success. However, on the battlefield, it was the general's responsibility to try to avoid unnecessary sacrifices. Although she did not dare to say that she could lead this group of people to retreat unscathed, at least they would not be completely wiped out. Whether it was for public or private reasons, it was better for her to do this dangerous task than for Mu. Cui Yuji was somewhat hesitant. That day when they were discussing fire attacks, he already knew that He Yan was not simple and could not be underestimated. He was also much more capable than Mu. However, he was not familiar with He Yan. He did not know how far he could go. Moreover, He Yan was not his subordinate. Even if he agreed, Xiao Ju could not do anything about it. Therefore, he looked at Xiao Ju and said, "Miss He's abilities, of course I believe in Miss He's abilities. I am also very assured that Miss He will do this. However, I do not know what military governor Xiao thinks." Xiao Ju looked at He Yan, and He Yan looked back at her. Her gaze was clear and full of vitality. She was wearing the armor, looking heroic and high-spirited. It illuminated her entire face. She was like the young man who shone in the martial arts arena of the Liang Province Guards. Her movements were as nimble as the wind. The wind of freedom should not be trapped in a small place. The corners of his mouth twitched slightly. He said calmly, "Go." He Yan said, "Thank you, military governor." She originally thought that Xiao Ju might not agree and that she would have to persuade him. She did not expect that he would agree so readily today. However, Xiao Ju could probably see that it was better for her to go than for Mu. As the main commander, every order he gave had to be fair. "Be careful," Xiao Ju said, "there is no need to rush. If the situation is not right, retreat. I have other ways." He Yan said, "Understood." He Yan led Mu Yi and the others forward. Excluding herself, there were a total of 50 people. These 50 men were the 50 best fighters in Jiang City's army. Because they had to hide in the dark, ambush, hide, set fire, and retreat, they might have to fight with some Yudo. Therefore, they could not be weak. He Yan looked at them and thought of the vanguard battalion that he had been in. In the vanguard battalion, there were more than 10 people who rushed to the front of every battle. However, these dozen or so people would be different every time, because most of the time, they would never return. However, it was also because of them that the army was able to create the possibility of victory. At the mouth of the gourd, Cui Yuezhi led the troops to guard it. Xiao Ju led the main force on a boat to fight with the Yuto on the canal of Jiang City. Before she left, Xiao Ju did not give her any specific instructions. In other words, from now on, the initiative of their secret arson operation was in He Yan's hands. "Miss He," Mu Yi looked at her. "What should we do?" Time gradually passed and the sky was about to brighten. There was not much time for them to hesitate here. Although Mu Yi knew that He Yan's skills were outstanding, he was not confident that He Yan could command a surprise attack. He did not even know that He Yan was the one who proposed the fire attack plan. He only thought that He Yan had the same idea as him, to use his skills to sneak onto the Yudo's ship and set fire to the Yudo's ship. Should we prepare the ointment now? Muyet. He thought that she had not thought of a way and took the initiative to remind her. We will hide the ointment on the shore and think of a way to transport it onto the Yudo's ship. How about it? No need. He Yan raised his hand and said, "Prepare 10 small boats." 10 small boats? Mu Yi frowned. Now that the ships have been given to military governor Shao, there are not many ships at the moment. Why do we need so many ships? He Yan said, "I thought about it. It is much harder to burn their ships one by one than to burn our own. Why don't we burn our ships?" Mu Yi was stunned. The dozens of people behind him did not understand. Someone asked, "What do you mean? Can you explain it more clearly?" "I need 10 small boats. Put all the ointment that you have prepared on the 10 small boats. Then pile them with hay and pretend that they are the same as the other warships." When the two sides fight, the Yudo will think that they are just small boats piled with ointment, the same as the ships of Jiang City's army. When the southeast wind blows, we can pretend to fight them and get closer to the Yudo's ship. At that time, we can set fire to our own ship. This is the only way to have the highest chance of success. You can also jump into the river and save yourselves, she said. Chapter 154. When these 50 people first accepted Cui Yueji's orders, they never thought that they would come back alive. When they heard He Yan's words, they froze on the spot. After a while, someone asked, "Is this feasible?" "I'll attract the Yudo's attention from the front," He Yan said. "However, your boats will need to be arranged according to my arrangements." She had never set up a formation on the water before, but she couldn't care less at the moment. However, He Yan looked at the distant sky. There was a ray of light at the end of the sky. The sky was about to brighten. Would there be any wind today? Would the heavens be on their side? But no matter what, fighting was their destiny. "Pick up the sabers in your hands and follow me," she said. Dawn finally broke, and the last bit of darkness dissipated. A red sun rose from the front of the canal, accompanied by clouds and mist. Golden light spread across the entire river, and Jiang City was enveloped in a splendid glow. The soldiers on the city tower blew the horn. At the embankment, the Jiang army was ready to set off. Their boats docked at the shore like dense black iron. A dark spot gradually appeared in the distance. Slowly, the dark spot grew bigger and bigger. At first, it was a flat line. Then, the line became wider and longer until it covered a large area of the canal. Everyone could see clearly that it was the Yudo's boats. The Yudo's boats were extremely tall. At the bow of the boats stood the Yudo soldiers. They were all wearing leather robes and small round hats made of black lamb skin. 2 red belts were attached to the back of the hats. They were all tall and strong. Before they even got close, they laughed loudly and intimidated the Jiang army. Commander-in-Chief, a deputy soldier behind her said in a trembling voice, "They're men, at least 150,000, Xiaoju said. 20,000 against 150,000. This was no longer a battle of numbers. The disparity was so big that it made people feel desperate. "Follow me onto the boat." Xiaoju took the lead and stepped onto the small boat on the shore. Compared to the Yudo's ships, the Jiang City army's ships were too small. The Yudo soldiers had come up from the north of the canal, and it was a long journey. The ships were large and sturdy, and it was unknown what kind of wood they were made of, but it should be very precious. In recent years, Dewey had been busy quelling the chaos in the western Chang and southern barbarians, giving the Yudo an opportunity. Unknowingly, the wealth of the Yudo kingdom was not to be underestimated. Its treasury might not be any weaker than that of Dewey. The soldiers of Jiang City followed the Xiaoju onto the ship, and the ship headed in the direction of the Wu Tuo army. The leader who led the troops to Jiang this time was the Yuchuo general Maka. Maka was actually not very tall. In fact, compared to the bodyguards around him, he was rather short. He was not very old and had just stood up, but he was already very famous in the Utopia Kingdom. This was because he was extremely adept at sneak attacks. Furthermore, because he was the cousin of the king of Wuhua Kingdom, the king had entrusted him with an army of 150,000 soldiers, allowing him to fight his first battle in Dawei. Maka was determined to win over Jiang. The spies hidden in Jiang City had already found out about the current situation in Jiang City. The territory of a vassal king did not have many soldiers and horses, and it had been peaceful and happy all these years. Conquering such a city was actually a piece of cake. The only problem was the princess of Jiang, Mu Hongjin. This woman was very cunning, but she was only a woman. However, there seemed to be more people in Jiang City these days. It was said that a white-clothed swordsman was chasing after the spies of the Utopia Kingdom. It was unknown if the news had been leaked, but the commoners of Jiang City had already begun to evacuate. In order to avoid any more trouble, they decided to take action in advance. Is the one leading the troops this time Cui Yuezhi? Maka asked. I heard that he was also a fierce general when he was young, but now that he's old, I wonder if he still wants to use his blade? His trusted aides around him roared with laughter. He can't compare to the general's blade. Maka stroked the scabbard on his waist. If he really dies under my blade, it'll be his glory. His laughter drifted over the river and landed in the midst of Jiang City's army. Xiao Ju stood at the bow of the boat and watched as more and more Utopia soldiers appeared in the distance. After a moment, she curled her lips. Idiots! What? The deputy soldier was puzzled. All the Utopia soldiers are lined up at the bow and stern. Looks like they're afraid they won't die quickly enough. Xiao Ju stood up and walked inside. She grabbed the cloak in Chi Wu's hands and tied it around herself. Try to stay on the water for as long as possible. There's no need to stop someone who's rushing to their death. At the same time, Hien also boarded a small boat filled with ointment. The ointment and firewood on the boat were tightly covered with thick linen cloth. It looked no different from the ordinary boats of Jiang City's army, and there was a military flag on top of it. The 50 people were divided into 10 groups of 5. Hien and Mu Yi were on the same boat. She said to the others, "Follow me from afar. Don't come close." She took out a piece of paper from her bosom and casually picked up a charcoal pen from the ground to draw a picture. Look at this. There were a few boats drawn on the map, and the one in the middle was circled by Hien. I'll use this boat to attract the attention of the Wuduo people. The rest of your boats will be arranged according to the directions I drew. When I give the signal, you must burn the boat and jump into the water. Can you do it? Miss He, someone said worriedly. Why don't we do it instead? It was too dangerous to act as the Yudo's bait. If they weren't careful, they could lose their lives. Although no one was willing to die, they couldn't watch a girl take the lead and face danger alone. Don't worry, I have my own plans. Hien tightened the whip around her waist and took the lead to walk towards the boat. The commander-in-chief has already boarded the boat. Let's set off too. The boats met at the canal in front of the city gate. Jiang City's army looked as small as ants against the countless Yudo boats. However, the youth standing at the front of the boat was dressed in black armor. His posture was as straight as a sword, and he was as beautiful as a spring willow. However, he held a long sword in his hand, and his aura was as cold as a blade. The morning sun shone on his body, giving off a myriad of brilliance. He was so cold that one couldn't look at him directly. This was an unfamiliar man. Maka was slightly stunned. She asked the person beside her hesitantly, "This isn't Cui Yuezhi. Who is he?" Cui Yuezhi was a fatty, not a handsome man. However, Cui Yuezhi wasn't here. Where did this person come from? Was he a new talent in Jiang City? However, the secret letter sent back by the Yudo spies never mentioned this person. Since he was not an outstanding person, why would Mu Hongjin hand over the small number of city guards to him? I've never seen this person before. The subordinate beside her said hesitantly, maybe Cui Yuezhi can't do it anymore. There's no one in Jiang City, so Mu Hongjin found someone to replace him. This person is so young. It's obvious that he's not a match for the general. Maka didn't say anything. As a general, he naturally had an intuition as to whether the other party was an embroidered pillow or a real person. This person didn't look ordinary. Maka was puzzled, but he didn't have time to think about it. He slowly pulled out the long sword at his waist, pointed it forward, and shouted, "Warriors, follow me." For a moment, the shouts of fighting shook the sky. Yudo also knew that once they went ashore, there would be nothing that could stop them. Jiang City was as fragile as paper. 20,000 people weren't even enough for them to play with. In order to protect the civilians, Jiang City soldiers could only fight more on the water. Fighting on the water was nothing. Their boats were big and sturdy. Killing people on the boats only caused them to shake a little. When the big boat met the small one, it was like a big fish meeting a small fish. It was cruel and intense. The big boat almost smashed the small one. However, the small one was nimble and knew that there were reefs hidden in the water, so it cleverly avoided them. The two armies fought on the boats. To catch bandits, first catch the leader. Maka's target was the young man wearing black armor and holding a sword. At this moment, the sky was clear and cloudless. There was not even a trace of wind. Her heart gradually sank. The people from the Directorate of Heavens had said that there might be no wind today, but even if there was wind, it would not be at this time. But would there really be wind in this kind of weather? Would the heavens really stand on Jiang City's side? She looked at the Yudo Kingdom's ships in the distance. The Yudo Kingdom's ships were huge and heavy. They were especially famous above the canal. As she looked, she was suddenly startled. A moment later, a smile appeared on her lips. Mui asked, "What's wrong? Miss He, what are you smiling about?" "I'm laughing at the Yuto's stupidity," she said. "Look at the heads and tails of those ships. They're all linked together." The Yudo Kingdom was not a water town like Jiang, and the soldiers were not good at water. Therefore, all the ships were chained together at the head and the stern. The Yudo probably felt that this would save them a lot of effort. It would also prevent one of the ships from being unable to keep up with the rest. At a glance, it looked like a fleet. When sea merchants were transporting goods, this was a common method. However, it was a bit cumbersome to use it here. Especially today, they wanted to use fire to attack. Mu Yi's eyes lit up. "We just need to set fire to one of their ships." But soon, he became worried again. Their ships are chained together. Once a small boat enters, it'll be like a sheep entering a tiger's den. I'm afraid that the Yudo will surround the boat before it can be burned. "Don't worry." He Yen called for the rest of the people to board the ship. "Stay where you are on the map. I'll bring a ship and lure them over." "Lure them over?" Mui asked. "How?" It was not worthwhile for the Yudo to chase after a single ship. It was possible before, but now that so many ships were chained together, they would probably keep an eye on the Xiaoju's Jiang army. "I have my ways," He Yen said. Just as he finished speaking, a man's voice was heard. "He." He Yen turned his head. When he saw that it was Chu Zhao, he was slightly startled. "You asked Cui Jiao to go to the prince's mansion to get his highness's clothes. It's not safe outside, so I asked Cui Jiao to go back to the Cui mansion first and bring it to you." Chu Zhao smiled. "Fortunately, I made it in time." "Brother Chu, why are you still in Jiang City?" He Yen asked. "It's not safe here. You should have left with the evacuating people." This person did not even have the ability to protect himself. If the Yudo entered the city, he would probably be in danger. Even His Highness stayed in the prince's mansion. How could I abandon my comrades? Jiang is also Dawei's land. He can protect the people in Jiang. Although I'm not as good as He, I won't run away alone. I'll advance and retreat with my friends. But you don't know martial arts. He Yen thought for a moment. Forget it. Wait a moment. She jumped off the boat and walked towards a tent by the shore. She went in for a moment, then jumped out again. She was holding something that looked like a piece of clothing. She stuffed it into Chu Zhao's hands. "I bought this from the embroidery workshop in Jiang City. It's made of mermaid yarn. I heard from the shop assistant that it's invulnerable to swords and spears. Although I don't know if it's true, if you wear it it'll be able to protect you. He Yen sighed in her heart. She originally wore the clothes under her armor because she thought that it was better than nothing. If it really was a treasure, she would just treat it as wearing 2 sets of armor. However, when she saw Chu Zhao standing there so weakly that even a gust of wind could blow him away, she felt that it would be better to give the clothes to him. Although she did not know if this person was an enemy or not, he asked Cui Jiao to go back to the Cui mansion first and did not leave alone. He was loyal. Chu Zhao was stunned. Just as he was about to speak, he saw that the girl had already turned around and followed the crowd onto the boat. Her back view looked extremely elegant, and she was quickly drowned out by the people around her. The boat gradually left the shore and headed towards the center of the river where the battle cries were the loudest. There, the light of swords and the flames of war swirled. The boat was like a moth flying into a flame. It swayed and swayed, but there was no turning back. Chu Zhao looked down at the clothes in his hands. It seemed that the clothes in his hands had just been taken off a woman's body. It was still warm. She really did not care about trifles. He slowly lifted the clothes. The skirt was long. It was a woman's dress. He was stunned for a moment. Then he shook his head and laughed. The people in the city hid in their houses. They closed the doors and windows tightly. The young were held in the arms of the old. They stared at the doors of their houses as if they were staring at all their hope. Time slowly passed. There was not a single person on the streets. Jiang City, which was usually bustling, was as quiet as a ghost town today. In the prince's mansion, Mu Hongjin sat in the hall and looked outside. The windows were wide open. The willow branches were as gentle as usual. The sky was clear and there was no wind today. She lowered her eyes. Her fingertips gradually dug into the soft cushions of the high seat. There was no wind today. At the mouth of the bottle gourd, the soldiers hiding in the dark were like sure too. They were silent and quiet. The archers were hiding in the dark. They were waiting for the Yudo to come ashore to ambush them. Cui Yuezhi stood behind a tree. His face, which was always smiling, was unusually solemn today. There were 150,000 Yudo. They did not even need to fight. Once they entered the city, the remaining people in the city, old and young, would have no way to survive. If they rushed a little faster, the people who were still fleeing on the road would also face a disaster. He had brought a portion of Jiang City's soldiers here to prevent them from coming ashore and entering the city. He wanted to become the last line of defense in front of the city gate. However, if the Xiaoju could not eliminate the main force of the Yudo, most of the Yudo would make it here. They would definitely not be able to stop the vicious wolves heading into the city with just the few of them. They could only do as He Yen had said last night. They could use fire to wipe out all the Yudo in one fell swoop. Only then would they be able to stop the remaining Yudo that had escaped the net. However, could the fire attack technique really work? A Jiang City soldier was lying in the grass with a bow and arrow on his back. The long grass covered his face and made his face slightly itchy. However, he still remained motionless and did not even have the intention to scratch it. He was not the only one who remained motionless. The grass in front of him, the flowers blooming by the roadside, the calm water surface, and the soft dandelions, all remained motionless. There was no wind today. Cui Yuezhi's heart gradually sank. There was no wind today, and the weather was not good. With less than 20,000 soldiers in the Xiaoju's hands, he was afraid that they would not be able to compete with the Yudo without using fire. Their so-called ambush here might end up becoming the prey of the Yudo. But why was there no wind today? The Xiaoju's master, the white-clothed swordsman who looked very powerful, said to him with certainty, "Don't worry. There will definitely be wind today." The people from the Directorate of Astronomy said that there was a 50% chance that there would be wind today. However, Lu Buang said, "Arrange an ambush. There will definitely be wind today." They had heard that lay Buddhist Lu Buang could perform divination, so they believed him without a doubt. Or perhaps, they were deceiving themselves and hoping that he was telling the truth, so they believed him. But now there was no wind. By the way, where was Lu Buang? Only then did Cui Yuezhi remember that he had not seen Lu Buang since he woke up early this morning and left the Cui mansion for the tent in the martial arts practice field. There were slight waves on the water surface. It was not the wind, but the fish in the water. The spring grass by the embankment was red and green. Deep in the forest with strange stones, someone was sitting on the ground with a guqin in front of him. The man was dressed in white, and his robe was clean and spotless. His appearance was particularly elegant, and there was a sword at his waist. He looked like a chic Jianghu swordsman. Lu Buwang looked up at the sky. The sunlight shone in the woods, casting a golden shadow. It didn't make people feel hot, and the warmth was just right. This was a spring day brimming with vitality. Every new patch of green carried the feeling of spring as it fell into the gentle land of water. The sounds of fighting in the distance were in sharp contrast to the tranquility here. Not far away, there was a clear distinction. The wind hadn't come yet, but Lu Buwang knew that the wind would definitely come whether it came earlier or later. Many years ago, there was no chance of survival in the dead end. Many years later, there was a glimmer of hope. At first, he didn't know who those two shadows were, but now it seemed that they were most likely his disciple He Yen and the young and valiant right military governor, Xiao Huaijin. These two people were generals who had fought on the battlefield for many years. They had already saved many people's lives, which was a merit. Heaven would not treat people with merit too harshly. Wherever they went, they would be blessed by good fortune. Perhaps it was because of their righteousness and light, even the death chess game in Jiang City had a glimmer of hope. These two people could bring the death chess game back to life. Although they couldn't see the end, they could see a glimmer of hope. Since there was hope, it meant that the road wasn't a dead end. Therefore, the wind would definitely come. Although it might not come too early, the wind would definitely come. What he had to do was to grasp that chance of survival tightly and help these two people completely revive this chess game. The sounds of fighting in the distance seemed to be getting closer. This wasn't an illusion. Lu Buwang looked forward. Several large ships were sailing this way. Yudo wasn't a fool. He wouldn't be hindered by Xiaoju all the time. While their main force was fighting with the Jiang City army led by Xiaoju, another team took advantage of the chaos to sneak ashore. As long as they got ashore and took control of the entire Jiang City, it was only a matter of time before they won the naval battle. Cui Yuezhi's men were at the mouth of the calabash, which was still some distance away. They thought they were the first line of defense, but in fact, they weren't. Lu Buwang was the first line of defense. Among Taoist Yunji's 7 disciples, he was the best at the art of Qimin Duanjia. Over the years, he rarely used this technique because it was extremely energy-consuming and damaged his body. He was no longer the young man from back then. Even though his white clothes were fluttering in the wind, his hair had already turned white. However, he would always stay here and guard her city. Lu Buwang plucked the zither strings. Chapter 155. The grass was green, and sometimes there were flowers. Amidst the chaos of bees and butterflies, the sound of the zither strings was clear and long, slowly drifting to the surface of the water. It was really eye-catching for such a person to play the zither in such a chaotic situation. The white-clothed swordsman sat quietly. As his slender hands stroked the strings, the sound of the zither flowed out. It was still the song, Slow Time. In fact, he could play many songs, but over the years, he had played this song the most. He had set up a formation around him, and the sound of the zither also had the ability to confuse people. When Yudo arrived here, he would be confused by the formation, and it would be difficult for him to find the entrance. He could stall for more time for Cui Yuezhi and wait for the late arrival of the east wind from God. Yudo's ship was slowly approaching, and someone got off the ship aggressively. Lu Buwang sat quietly, as if he was meditating on Chiyun Mountain back then. He was calm and unhurried. Taoist Yunji didn't praise him, but he had always been very tolerant of him. Everyone always said that he was the best among the 7 senior brothers on the mountain back then. His senior brothers always laughed and joked that he would bring glory to the sect one day. But he had been expelled from the sect long ago. The sound of the zither paused, as if disturbed by a foreign object, and he played the wrong rhythm. Lu Buwang was slightly absent-minded. Back then, he met Mu Hongjin at the foot of Chiyun Mountain. Later, he learned that Mu Hongjin was the beloved daughter of King Mingji in Jiang City. Mu Hongjin didn't want to marry the son of an important official in the court, so she begged Lu Buwang to take her away. Lu Buwang hesitated for a long time and decided to let her wait in the inn. He returned to Chiyun Mountain with his junior sister first and reported this matter to Taoist Yunji. But once he went up the mountain, he couldn't come down again. It was already a year later when he went down the mountain. Mu Hongjin always thought that he lied to her and deliberately told King Mingji about her whereabouts. He was the one who sent Mu Hongjin back to King Mingji's mansion. In fact, that wasn't the case. Back then, Lu Buwang did go up the mountain in a hurry. When he went up the mountain, he told Taoist Yunji that a girl who ran away from her marriage was forced by her family and was now resting outside. He hoped that Taoist Yunji could find a way to let him take Mu Hongjin up the mountain. Lu Buwang was honest and kind by nature. For the first time, he lied to Taoist Yunji. He only said that Mu Hongjin was a girl from an ordinary family, and did not mention that she was the daughter of Prince Mengji. Lu Buwang was worried. Once Taoist Yunji knew Mu Hongjin's true identity, he might not save her. However, Taoist Master Yunji knew better than him. Are you talking about Mu Hongjin from Prince Meng's mansion? Lu Buwang was stunned. Master, you're so stupid. Taoist Master Yunji looked at him and scolded him with a sullen face. Do you know who she is? She was the only daughter of King Mengji and would inherit the throne in the future. The reason why King Mengji arranged this marriage for her is because she will become King Mengji's daughter. You were so careless as to bring her up Chiyun Mountain. Do you know what kind of disaster you will bring to Jiang City? How much trouble would it bring to Chiyun Mountain? Even if you don't care about the lives of the people in Jiang City, your senior martial brothers grew up with you. Don't tell me you don't care about their safety? Master, it's not like that. Lu Buwang argued. Taoist Yunji sighed and said, Do you think King Mengji will let go of Chiyun Mountain if he knows that you hid his daughter here? He won't know. Buwang, you're too naive. Taoist Yunji flicked his sleeves and said, Give up. I won't do anything. Lu Buwang knelt on the ground. After thinking for a while, he stood up and bowed to Taoist Yunji. I understand. What do you want to do? I'll think of a way myself. Lu Buwang thought that although he was not as capable as Taoist Yunji, there was always a way out. He must be able to think of another way. The most important thing now was that he had to go down the mountain first. The day he agreed to meet Mu Hongjin was approaching. Are you still going to find that woman? Lu Buwang said, Yes, I've already made an agreement with her. Taoist Yunji said, You can't go down the mountain. What? I can't watch you destroy Chiyun Mountain, Taoist Yunji said. You must stay on the mountain. Master, she's still waiting for me. Taoist Yunji's face was completely ruthless. Lu Buwang slowly pulled out the long sword at his waist. He didn't want to fight with his master, but he was really anxious. However, his swordsmanship was not as good as Taoist Yunji's, so he was defeated in the end. Taoist Yunji locked him in a water cave on the mountain. The cave was surrounded by waterfalls and fragrant orchids. Just looking at it, the scenery was very beautiful. But Taoist Yunji had also set up a formation around him, so he couldn't leave the formation and could only be trapped here. Lu Buwang's Chimen Duanjia couldn't be compared with Taoist Yunji's after all. He begged Taoist Yunji in despair, Master, I just need to go down the mountain and say something to her. I can't go back on my words. She's still waiting for me. Master, if you can solve my formation, you can go down the mountain. Taoist Yunji turned and left. Lu Buwang was meditating in the formation and trying to solve it. But this formation was even more powerful than all the formations he had encountered in the past. He was anxious and kept solving the formation day and night. Finally, he fell ill and lost his energy. Yushu came to see him and gave him medicine. Seeing Lu Buwang covered in wounds, she was very distressed and said softly, Senior martial brother, why are you doing this? Can you beg Master to let me out? Lu Buwang leaned against the stone wall of the cave and was dying, but his tone was still stubborn. I want to go down the mountain. Yushu took a step back and couldn't help crying and shouting at him. So what if you go down the mountain? She's already married. She didn't wait for you. Mu Hongjin has already married her husband. Lu Buang widened his eyes slightly. He was in the mountain and in the formation, so he couldn't sense the changes in time outside. He could only count the days. Every other day he would carve a stroke on the stone wall. Looking back, more than 200 days and nights had passed. That girl, who was wearing a red dress with bells on her long braids and always stuck to him with a smile, was already married? What kind of mood did she have? Was it the hatred of not waiting for him and being stood up, or was it the despair of being forced to get into the bridal sedan? Lu Buwang's heart ached violently. She didn't wait for you. She has already forgotten your agreement. His junior martial sister stood in front of him and said with tears in her eyes, "So, you should also forget her." Forget her? How was that possible? He didn't know when he was in love with her, but he only knew when she left. He had long been used to the days of being relied on, pestered, and deceived. Even though he was angry, he enjoyed it. How could he forget her so easily? When was she found by the people of the mansion, and when did she get married? He asked slowly. Yu Shu answered, "Not long after you left, she was found by the soldiers. She got married not long after." Senior martial brother, she still wanted to persuade him, "Why don't you go and admit defeat to Master and live a good life on Chiyun Mountain in the future? Don't mention that matter again, okay?" Lu Buang didn't speak. Senior martial brother? He raised his head. The young man's eyes, which had always been clean and clear like the warm sun in spring, were now a little cold and distant. Yu Shu was also frightened by his eyes. "You can go." Lu Buang said, "Don't come back in the future." He worked harder to solve the formation and studied it. He ignored whether his body could bear it or not, and there was only one thought in his mind. He wanted to go down the mountain. Lu Buang's Chiman Duanjia advanced by leaps and bounds in this day of hard work. At the same time, he also noticed that the power of Taoist Yunji's formation was gradually weakening. Another spring day came, and he broke out of the formation. The spring rain wet the green grass under the eaves, and the young man's white clothes were splashed with mud. He was completely undecided, and he walked firmly step by step. The senior martial brothers and junior martial sisters surrounded Taoist Yunji's bed. After such a long time, the formation was getting weaker and weaker. It wasn't his illusion that Taoist Yunji's time was coming. Lu Buang was stunned. He rushed to Taoist Yunji's bed and knelt down. Taoist Yunji looked at him and asked, "Have you broken the formation?" Lu Buang nodded. His master reached out and touched his pulse slightly. He sensed something inside deeply. "You still want to go down the mountain?" he asked. Lu Buang knelt upright and said, "Yes." There was a long silence. "You can go." The master who raised him said word by word, "From now on, you are no longer a member of my sect. Don't go up Chiyun Mountain again." "Master." The senior martial brothers were shocked and pleaded for him. Taoist Yunji didn't speak. He closed his eyes, and when he looked again, he had already passed away. In a single night, he had lost the master who had raised him and the right to stay on Chiyun Mountain. After burying Taoist Yunji with the senior martial brothers, Lu Buang went down the mountain alone. After this farewell, he knew that it would be forever and never be able to meet again. His wound hurt faintly. Breaking the formation by force like this had hurt his foundation after all. It was raining heavily. Without an umbrella, he stumbled on the muddy mountain road without stopping all the way. Finally, he reached the foot of the mountain and entered Jiang City. The city was as lively and warm as that spring day. There was no difference at all. Lu Buang walked to Prince Mingji's mansion. He hid under the eaves opposite the mansion, wearing a bamboo hat, and wanted to see Mu Hongjin. He didn't know what to say when he saw Mu Hongjin. He was the one who failed to keep the appointment, and he was also the one who was late for more than a year. He was the one who asked her to wait for him, and he was also the one who didn't come. But if she wanted to leave and shook his arm like back then, asking him to take her away, Lu Buang thought that he might still be helpless and do as she wished. Then he saw Mu Hongjin. Unlike the arrogant girl back then, she had become more beautiful. Wearing an exquisite and luxurious robe, she got out of the carriage and said something to the man beside her. The man beside her also looked gentle. He hugged her waist from behind, and his robe couldn't cover her slightly bulging belly. Mu Hongjin was pregnant. The legendary bad old man was not old, and his gaze was very gentle when he looked at her. She looked back at him with a gentle gaze, completely different from the arrogant and willful girl in his memory. The rain wet his boots and robe, but Lu Buwang felt that it was not as embarrassing as him at this moment. They were in harmony with each other, and they were a loving couple. They looked like an immortal couple while he stood here, looking out of place. But why should he make Mu Hongjin wait here all the time? This girl was as bright and lively as the peach blossoms at the foot of Chiyun Mountain. Beautiful people or things were always discovered by others. Just as he fell in love with her unknowingly, Mu Hongjin's husband was the same. Mu Hongjin already had her own peaceful life, so there was no need for him to disturb her. As if his gaze was too hot and painful, Mu Hongjin seemed to feel it and looked back. Lu Buwang turned slightly and hid under the shadow of the eaves. "What's wrong?" The man beside her held her hand and asked. "Nothing." Mu Hongjin shook her head. "It's probably my illusion." The rain was cold. He was obviously hiding under the eaves, so why did it wet his cheeks? He seemed to taste bitterness at the corner of his lips. It turned out that the spring rain was also not sweet. He strode away. The sound of the zither was poetic and picturesque, covering all the murderous intent in the jungle. Some Yudo stepped in without noticing and suddenly screamed. For a moment, there were screams. Finally, someone realized that something was wrong and stopped the people behind him. "Don't come in. There's an ambush." Lu Buwang smiled slightly. After leaving the mountain that year, he had been silent for a long time, like a walking corpse, not knowing what he could do in the future. He could neither return to Chiyun Mountain nor find Mu Hongjin. For a time, he felt that living in the world was meaningless. Until Yushu found him. His little junior sister was not as cute as before, and she was much more haggard. Standing in front of him, Lu Buwang suddenly realized that Yushu was also a big girl, no longer the little sister who ran around behind him. "Senior martial brother," the girl looked at him with tears in her eyes. "I'm sorry." Well, he didn't understand. "The reason why Miss Mu was found by the soldiers of the prince's mansion was that I told on her." Lu Buwang's expression froze on the spot. I like you very much. I don't want you to be with her." Yet, Yushu seemed to want to speak out all her faults in one go, as if she was seeking release. "I eavesdropped on your conversation, so I told Meng Ji Wang her hiding place. I thought that as long as she got married, you would forget her and stop thinking about her. I didn't expect you to be so stubborn for so many years." "I'm sorry I was wrong," she burst into tears. "I hurt you, senior martial brother. I'm sorry." She cried to her heart's content, but Lu Buwang was like a stone, his whole body stiff and cold. He was young and ignorant, and his mind was rough. He didn't see the deep affection in his little junior sister's eyes when she looked at him, nor did he see the hostility that flashed by when Yushu looked at Mu Hongjin. A girl's love and hate came directly and simply. She only cared about venting when she was angry, but she didn't expect that she would miss a pair of lovers. It wasn't until the world changed and the regrets snowballed that she realized her mistake. "How could you do this?" For the first time, he got angry at Yushu. Did you know, he didn't continue. What did he know? Back then, he didn't know that he loved her so deeply. He was like a fool. Eldest martial brother, who came after hearing the news, found him and said, "Little Seven, don't blame Yushu. She was young and ignorant, and now she knows that she was wrong. Also, don't blame Master for not saving you and locking you in the formation on Chiyun Mountain." Lu Buwang replied blankly, "I didn't blame anyone. He only blamed himself." "Do you know why Master locked you in Chiyun Mountain back then?" Eldest martial brother said, "Master has always been kind and generous. Since he adopted us 7 orphans, so what if Mu Hongjin is the princess? If Master really wanted to protect her, why would he be afraid of the danger brought by this identity?" Lu Buwang looked at him, not understanding what he meant. "Master did it for you." Taoist Yunji once divined for Lu Buwang, and the divination showed that one day he would die young because of a woman. Deep love would kill him. You are Master's favorite disciple. Master was afraid that you would lose your life because of Mu Hongjin, so he locked you in the formation. Eldest martial brother said, although he was biased in his actions, he did it wholeheartedly for you. Lu Buwang felt that it was ridiculous. It was just a divination. How could he miss it like this? Taoist Yunji did it for him, so who could he blame? He could only blame the fickleness of the world. He had been staying in Jiang City, hiding in the dark, and doing the same things as before every day. Until one day, Yushu was arrested by Mu Hongjin's guards in the temple. Yushu didn't have the guts to assassinate her. As soon as the news came out, Lu Buwang knew that Mu Hongjin was forcing him to show up. Not only was he not angry, but there was even a trace of joy in his heart. After so many years, he could finally see her in broad daylight. He saw Mu Hongjin in the temple hall in the middle of the night. Time had polished her to be even more magnificent and beautiful. She was like a ripe honey fruit, and her whole body was full of unspeakable flirtatiousness and wildness. Lu Buwang thought bitterly in his heart, who made her like this? Was it her current husband? Well, they even had a child together. She had already gotten married and had children, and was getting further and further away from him. The woman's red robe was gorgeous, and the golden crown slightly reflected sparkling colors in the night. Her eyes were even brighter than this. She stared at him, and there was no longer the naughtiness and innocence in her eyes from many years ago. He had thousands of words to say to her, but in the end, he didn't know where to start. In the end, the sentence he spat out was, "Where is Yushu?" Lu Buwang still remembered Mu Hongjin's gaze at that time, which seemed to be a little shocked and a little understanding. The moment he said that, he instantly regretted it. He shouldn't have been so blunt. He should have said something else. Asking her how she had been all these years and apologizing for breaking his promise back then was better than questioning her. Mu Hongjin looked at him as if she was looking at a stranger, and she replied lightly, "In prison." The conversation between the two of them was as distant as that between strangers, as if they were standing on opposing sides, and there was no longer the intimacy of the past. Lu Buwang was very conflicted. He wanted to stay here, talk to her more, and look at her more. But he was afraid that if he stayed here for too long, he wouldn't be able to control himself and reveal his feelings, which would cause trouble for Mu Hongjin. It had been a long time, and he didn't arrive in time back then. Now, Mu Hongjin already had someone else by her side, and she no longer needed him. Why should he come to disturb her and ask for a snub? He wanted Mu Hongjin to release Yushu and catch him. Taoist Yunji raised him, and Yushu was his daughter. He couldn't watch Yushu be imprisoned. Besides, Mu Hongjin's purpose of catching Yushu was him. Lu Buwang thought that Mu Hongjin must hate him very much, but people were stingy to show a trace of affection for things they didn't care about, so Mu Hongjin hated him. Perhaps, after so many years, she still had a little bit of love left. She's just a junior sister. You're so protective of her. Do you like her? Lu Buwang answered, yes. What did you say? Lu Buwang looked at her, as if he wanted to engrave her appearance at this moment in his heart forever. He said word by word, I like her. He admitted that he was the one who told on her, that he lied to Mu Hongjin and made up a promise casually, and that he had never liked Mu Hongjin. Mu Hongjin smiled. Her smile was contemptuous and sarcastic, as if his likes and dislikes were so insignificant and ridiculous. She wanted Lu Buwang to be her lover as a condition for letting Yushu go. Lu Buwang was furious. He was furious that she humiliated him and her like this. But in his anger, there was a faint desire. He was horrified to find that he had never given up in his heart. It was as if there were countless fire seeds buried in the ground. As long as she said a word, they could easily break out of the ground and start a prairie fire. He agreed. But Mu Hongjin was unwilling. Mu Hongjin wanted him to get out of Jiang City with Yushu and never set foot here again. She wanted to draw a clean line between herself and Lu Buwang so that they would never cross paths. This was the last time he talked to Mu Hongjin. Lu Buwang later changed his name to Layman Yunlin and traveled around. He went to many places. He was dressed in white and his swordsmanship was outstanding. Everywhere he went, people praised and admired him. But he was always cold and cheerless, as if he didn't care about anything. He also never saw his own senior brothers and Yushu again. In this world, everyone ultimately had to become their lonesome self. But he still returned to Jiang City every year during the Water God Festival. He secretly entered the city without anyone knowing, just to take a look at the city that Mu Hongjin was guarding. It was as if he was guarding her. Fushi's divination only asked about things and not people. This was a rule he set for himself later. It was inevitable to foresee twists and turns when doing divination for others. In order to avoid twists and turns, he tried his best to avoid some encounters that might bring misfortune. But he didn't know that every encounter in the human world had its own precious fate. While avoiding the calamity, he had also fallen into another trap of fate, just like himself. He regretted it all his life. He was close at hand but couldn't get it. In the depths of the dense forest, the screams became louder and louder, and more people came ashore. His zither music gradually became more and more intense, like a golden spear and armored horse, looming in the formation filled with killing intent. The formation wasn't omnipotent. The more people there were, the shorter the time it could be maintained, and the more energy it needed to consume. Back then, on Chiyun Mountain, when Taoist Yunji locked him in the formation, in order to get out as soon as possible, he ignored his injuries and forcibly broke the formation to study it. In the end, his mind was hurt. Over the years, he had never set up such an energy-consuming formation. A trace of blood slowly flowed out of Lu Buwang's lips. In the spring light, he smiled calmly, as if he was out of this world for the first time. It was as if he was still the young swordsman in white, standing in front of his sweetheart. Chapter 156. Battle cries filled the air on the canal as boats collided with each other. The Yuto surrounded the Jiang soldiers like vicious wolves. They outnumbered them, and the archers on the boats were ready. Arrows flew like shooting stars and pierced the boats of the Jiang soldiers into sieves in the blink of an eye. They could no longer sail. Although the Jiang soldiers who fell into the water could swim, they could not exert their strength in the water. The Yudo had also prepared many pitchforks, which looked like the tools fishermen used to spear fish. However, the tips were forged and sharp. They stabbed the Jiang soldiers who had fallen into the water. The water of the canal was quickly dyed red with blood. A young Jiang soldier dodged the sharp arrows shot from the Yudo's boat and jumped into the water. Dozens of Yudo laughed and stabbed him with the pitchforks in their hands. The Wudua people were strong to begin with, and the young man was only 16 or 17 years old. He couldn't dodge in time and was stabbed in the arm. Immediately after, the pitchforks stabbed at him from all directions, piercing through his body. The pitchforks were quickly retrieved, leaving a bloody hole in his chest. He struggled for a while and sank. Only blood was left on the surface of the water, proving that he had been alive. The deputy soldier looked back and shouted at the young man in the middle of the chaotic battle, "Commander, we can't do it. They have too many people." There were too many people. 2 fists were no match for 4 hands. They were outnumbered. This was not Gua City in the past. The only way to win by surprise was to attack with fire, but they still lacked an east wind. "No, we can't." Xiao Ju held a long sword in his hand. His gaze was as sharp as a blade. He said coldly, "Fight." Since he was the leader, he had been entangled in a chaotic battle. Maka was not a brainless person. Although he was arrogant, he had heard of Xiao Ju's name. Previously, he had used the Western Chang people as bait to ambush the Liangzhou guards. However, Xiao Ju's sudden return had disrupted the plan. Maka clearly remembered that the leader of the Western Chang, Raida Muzi, was extremely strong and fierce. However, he had died at the hands of Xiao Ju. Maka wanted to win. He wanted to take down Jiang City and claim credit from the monarch, but he did not want to lose his life for nothing. As he pushed back, he shouted to the Utaebin beside him, "His Majesty said that whoever takes Xiao Huijin's head will be the greatest contributor to this battle and will be conferred a noble title. Warriors, kill him." The motivation of military exploits was always useful at times like this. When the Yuchuo soldiers heard this, their blood boiled, and they immediately swarmed in front of Xiaoju. This was the scene that He Yen saw when he approached with his boat. The young commander-in-chief's cloak left a dark mark on the surface of the water. His long sword was as cold as ice, which made his handsome face look like a Rakshasa. He could take someone's life with a snap of his fingers. Wave after wave of people surged forward. Corpses had already piled up around him, but there was no sign of fatigue on the young man's face. He was as valiant as ever. "We can't go on like this." He Yen frowned. There were too many Yudo. One Xiaoju could fight against 10, or even 100, but what about 1,000 Yudo? What about 10,000? What about 100,000? Of course, he could fight his way out of the encirclement alone, but as long as the Yudo didn't come ashore, he would always have to stand in front of the civilians. The remaining Jiang City soldiers weren't enough to form a tacit understanding with him and cooperate seamlessly with him. Qi Wu and Fei Nu had both been arranged by Xiaoju to Cui Yueji's side. He could only fight by himself. He Yen thought for a moment, then said to the other people on the boat, "Do as I said. Row the boat to the position I drew and wait for orders. Don't go too far. Mu Yi," she said to Mu, "take this boat and follow me." After saying this, she put on Mu Hongjin's robe that Chu Zhao had given her. Mu Yi was stunned. "I disguised myself as Her Highness the Princess to draw some people away," He Yen replied. "Otherwise, the commander-in-chief won't be able to hold on for so long. We have to disperse the Yudo's forces in order to delay them for a longer time." "Even if you disguised yourself as Her Highness," Mu Yi couldn't help but say, "how do you know that they will definitely chase after us?" "You have to know," He Yen shook his head, "destroy their strength, seize their crown, and disintegrate their bodies. When a dragon fights in the wild, its path is exhausted. Moreover, the Yudo would think that compared to capturing Xiao Huaijin, they would be more confident in capturing Mu Hongjin, a woman who didn't know any martial arts." She raised her head and looked into the distance. It was already noon, and the sun was high in the sky. It was already slightly hot, and there wasn't even a hint of wind. There was still no wind. He Yen ordered the other boats to row further away. He and Mu Yi boarded the small boat alone and rowed in the direction of Xiaoju. However, they didn't row too close. They only stopped at a place where the Yudo soldiers around Xiaoju could see. They were a little anxious, as if they were lost. Where did that boat come from? Maka saw a small boat in the distance, on the other side of the soldiers' boat led by Xiaoju. This small boat looked exactly the same as the other boats of Jiang City soldiers. There was a banner on it, but it was indescribably strange. This boat didn't get close to where they were fighting. Instead, it seemed like it wanted to escape. Deserter? Maka vaguely felt that something was strange. He ordered people to row the small boat to check it out. The small boat only rowed a little when the scout came back and reported, "General, the person sitting on the boat seems to be Princess Mingji. She should want to abandon the city and escape." Maka's spirit rose. "Princess Mingji? Did you see it clearly?" This subordinate saw a woman wearing princess robes and a person dressed as a guard. "I don't know if it's true." Maka thought for a moment, then said, "Princess Mingji hasn't shown her face until now. She said she was in the prince's mansion to stabilize the soldiers' morale. I think it's very likely that she's planning to escape." "That's right, she's just a woman. Without someone to rely on, she's probably already scared out of her wits." He laughed sinisterly. "If that's the case, capture her." "But," his trusted aide beside him said, "General, our boats are fighting with Xiao Huaijin. We can't capture Mu Hongjin." After all, Yudo Kingdom wasn't a water city. The Yudo soldiers weren't as proficient in water as Jiang City soldiers. Moreover, they had come by water. The mountains were long and the water was wide, so they used iron hooks to connect the thousands of boats. At this moment, it was impossible to untie the boats. If they chased after Mu Hongjin, they would have to give up on the battle with Xiaoju. "Idiot!" Maka cursed. "To catch bandits, first catch the ringleader. So what if she's Xiao Huaijin? Xiao Huaijin isn't the master of Jiang City. If we capture Mu Hongjin, the Jiang City army will definitely fall into chaos. At that time, we'll win without a fight. There was one more thing he didn't say. Compared to Xiao Huaijin, Mu Hongjin was a woman. She was much easier to capture. Once we capture Mu Hongjin, this general will use her to knock on the gates of Jiang City. Xiao Huaijin must obediently surrender. Otherwise, I'll kill this woman in front of the Jiang City army. Maka's smile contained cruel malice. What do you think Xiao Huaijin will do? With Xiao Ju's reputation as a cold-blooded and heartless jade-faced commander-in-chief, he wouldn't even care about his biological father. What was Mu Hongjin to him? He naturally wouldn't surrender. Furthermore, Mu Hongjin was going to die anyway. If she died because Xiao Ju refused to lay down his weapon, the Jiang City army would naturally resent him. At that time, there would be internal strife, and the morale of the army would be in chaos. Jiang City would be nothing more than a sheet of loose sand. It would only be a matter of time before it collapsed. Turn the ship around and follow me. Maka smiled. The Yudo soldiers beside him didn't continue to surge forward wave after wave. The ship at the front turned around and sailed in another direction. The Jiang City armies stopped what they were doing and asked, "What's going on?" Why did they suddenly stop fighting? Even though the Jiang City army had been trained by Xiao Ju for a few days, they hadn't been trained for many years. Their formations were also old-fashioned. Xiao Ju had only brought 15,000 men with him. At this moment, nearly half of them had been lost. If the Yudo pursued them, the situation would be even worse for the Jiang City army. However, at this critical juncture, they retreated. Xiao Ju looked in the direction where the Yudo ships had left. On the vast river, there was a small boat with a banner. There was a red dot on the boat, which was like a bright signal on the river, attracting people to chase after it. "That's the princess?" The soldier beside him muttered. "No, it's He Yan." Xiao Ju's eyes darkened. After a moment, he said, "Follow them. They're catching up." Mu Yi said nervously. "Don't worry," He Yan said. "We only have 2 people on the boat. They're going after us, not the boat. You're a good swimmer. Later, hide in the water and don't show your face." "What about you?" Mu Yi looked at her blankly. "I'll give them a big gift." He Yan smiled faintly. She took out an iron ball from her bosom. This iron ball had barbs on all sides and was extremely sharp. It looked like the giant claws of a wild beast. She pulled out a long whip from her waist. There was a buckle on the iron ball, and she fastened it to the long whip. This, He Yan suddenly made her move. She threw the long whip in her hand at the reef. The iron ball sank into the reef, but it did not shatter. She quickly retracted her hand. On the reef, there were 5 empty holes. It was a frightening sight. If this thing was aimed at a person's heart, it could dig out a large piece of the person's chest. Mu Yi could not help but shiver. He knew that He Yan was not an ordinary girl. Her strength was astonishing. But seeing it with his own eyes, he was more and more shocked. "Miss He, you want to use this to fight?" This weapon was fierce, but it was not as agile as swords. She could only swing it once. Each whip could only kill one person. Before she could swing it a second time, the enemy would pounce on her. Moreover, what if the whip was cut in half? "No," He Yan shook her head. "I'm going against the boat." Mu Yi wanted to ask more questions, but He Yan pushed him. "Quickly get into the water." He subconsciously jumped into the water and hid behind the reef. He clenched the dagger in his hand. It was difficult to swing swords in the water. Only the dagger was agile. But it was not as agile as on land. The Yuchuo military ship was taller and flatter than the small boat in Jiang City. From afar, He Yan looked like a lamb forced into a strange path by a giant beast. "Your Highness," Maka stood at the bow of the ship and shouted. "Surrender. If you know what's good for you, maybe I will spare your life." He was determined to get Mu Hongjin. There was no one else on the small boat. Even the only guard was gone. Did the guards see that the situation was not good and left Mu Hongjin alone and ran away? Tiske, the people of Dawei are always so weak. The red-robed woman stood at the bow of the ship with her head lowered. She did not say anything. The distance between the two boats was getting closer and closer. Just as Maka was about to order people to capture her, the woman suddenly raised her head and jumped from the boat. The small boat was not as tall as the big boat. She did not want to jump onto the Uchuo military ship. Instead, she jumped onto the hull of the ship. Her feet stepped on the hull of the Uchuo ship and swept past like lightning. Ping pong ping ping ping. Her speed was extremely fast. With every step, the whip in her hand would hit the hull of the ship. The iron ball hit the hull of the ship and was quickly taken away by the whip. Only 5 empty claw marks were left. Water poured in. What's that sound? What is she doing? Capture her. Quickly release the arrows. Quickly release the arrows. The arrows were like black rain falling from all directions. The woman easily dodged them as if she was walking on flat ground. As she moved, her robe fell with the wind, revealing the black armor underneath. She landed in the wind and stepped onto her own ship. Standing at the bow of the ship, she looked at the ship that was gradually tilting due to the water. Her lips curled into a mocking smile. I am illiterate. I don't know how to read. I don't know the word surrender. Her gaze landed on the flustered and exasperated Maka's face. Her words were as arrogant as usual. If you know what's good for you, kneel down and kowtow to me. Perhaps I will spare your life. Maka was stunned. After a while, he said angrily, You are not Mu Hongjin? How can a piece of trash like you trouble Her Highness to take action? He Yen said with a smile, Her Highness should stay in the mansion. I can fight 3 people like you alone. Maka pulled out the long blade at his waist. I think you are courting death. But as soon as he finished speaking, the boat beneath him sank. Just now, He Yan's whip had smashed the bottom of the ship one by one, creating a row of holes. At this moment, the water was pouring in and the ship was already unstable. The Utopian soldiers swayed left and right with the ship. The ship was gradually sinking. Quickly go to the ship on the side. In the chaos, someone said, No, the ships are all connected. We have to cut the iron hooks. For the sake of convenience, the ships were all connected head to tail. Now, it was a trap that they had dug for themselves. A large ship tilted and sank, dragging all the other ships with it. They could neither advance nor retreat. Cut the iron hooks. Quickly. The iron hooks were heavy and sturdy, not something that could be cut in 1 or 2 moves. The Utopian soldiers covered Maka and went to another ship. The rest of the people were carried by the sinking ship, frantically trying to cut the hooks. Voila! The iron hook was cut off and fell into the water, bringing the boat full of holes with it as it slowly sank. Some of the Utopian soldiers who did not have time to escape also fell into the water. Not everyone could swim. For a moment, the water was filled with cries and screams. It was very chaotic. Maka was furious. He looked up at the culprit, but saw that the girl had already taken advantage of the chaos to row the ship far away. Chase after her. Maka shouted. Catch her, I want to skin her. Being played by a girl in front of everyone was a great humiliation. How could he be willing to accept it? He Yen rowed the ship across the water and reached out to Mui hiding behind the reef. He pulled him up. Quickly come up. Mui jumped onto the ship. He knew that there was no time to waste, so he immediately began to row. But when he glanced at He Yen, he was shocked. He knew that He Yen was very strong, but with just her strength, she had overturned a ship, and it was not even a small ship. It was really shocking. Just now, He Yen had stepped on the ship's side and swung the whip smoothly. Those Yudo did not even have time to react before they fell into her trap. In Mui's heart, besides admiration, there was also a faint excitement. He said to He Yen, Miss He, can we do what you did just now and overturn all their ships? Impossible. He Yen replied quickly. Now that we are in such a critical situation, how can we directly use the Iron Tiger Claw? Then why don't you do more? As soon as he said that, Mui also felt that he had gone too far. He Yen did not get angry. She only explained patiently, it's useless to do more. They don't have as much strength as I do. Even if they do have great strength, they may not be able to accurately hit their ships. Her skills had been honed through a long period of military campaigns in the past. Although the weapon was important, the person using the weapon was more important. Moreover, this method can only be used once. The Yuto are already prepared. I'm afraid that they have already prepared archers on the ship. Before we even get close, they will shoot. That whip just now was just to delay a little. The longer we delay, the greater our chances of winning. If we keep delaying, will the wind really come? We looked at the sky. Such a clear sky, but it filled his heart with haze. It was difficult for him to have any confidence. If Master says there will be wind, there will definitely be wind. He Yan's gaze was firm. If there is no wind, we will become the east wind. In short, don't stop fighting. She said, steer the ship in the direction of the ambush. On the other side, the Jiang city soldiers who were chasing after the Yudo soldiers also saw the scene just now. Everyone was stunned. He Yan's skill of smashing the ship with the whip was difficult to forget. Miss He is so powerful, someone murmured. It was not flattery, but even the most powerful person in the Jiang city army would not be able to do so. Strength and skill were secondary. What was more important was that she had to escape unscathed from so many Yudo soldiers. She had to grasp every moment with great precision. The Yudo's arrows were like rain. They were so dense, but they did not waver in the slightest. The ship was smashed, causing the Yudo to frantically cut the iron rings. Some Yudo who did not know how to swim were also drowned. The Jiang city soldiers, who had been suppressed before, felt slightly relieved. At this moment, they only felt happy. Xiao Ju lowered her eyes and whispered, I actually thought of something. She turned and ordered the deputy, take out the box. Before they boarded the ship, Xiao Ju had ordered people to carry the box. It was very heavy. One person opened the box and saw that it was full of things like the end of the whip in He Yan's hand, which looked like a tiger's claw. However, there was no whip. It was a sharp weapon that could be worn around the wrist. The 20 elite soldiers who knew how to swim, step forward, Xiao Ju said. The 20 elite soldiers who had been informed of the order in advance immediately stepped forward. Xiao Ju looked at them and said in a calm and indifferent voice, take the iron claws and enter the water. In the distance, the large ship was chasing after He Yan's small boat with all its might. There were only 2 people paddling the small boat. How could it compare to the large ship? He Yan would be caught up very quickly. 20,000 against 150,000 was a very difficult matter. He also knew that this battle was difficult to win. Moreover, the heavens might not be perfect. He had to be fully prepared for everything. This box of iron claws was his secret weapon. However, he didn't expect that she had the same idea as He Yan. However, she was in the light while he was in the dark. Smash the ship, he said. The sound of the zither and the sound of fighting on the river in the distance formed a sharp contrast. The spring sun and the battlefield were 2 completely unrelated things. The sunlight shone on the man in white, making his clothes even cleaner. At a glance, it seemed that he was still the young man in white. A drop of blood dripped onto the zither in front of him. The zither string seemed to move and made a very soft sound. The seemingly clear zither sound also became sad because of this. Roars and shouts came from the depths of the dense forest. There were more and more Yuto, crushing and trampling the flowers on the roadside. However, they couldn't continue moving forward, as if they were imperceptibly hindered. The seemingly peaceful and happy spring scenery had become a killing weapon, and there were ambushes everywhere. More and more blood dripped from Lu Buwang's lips, and the sound of the zither became more and more urgent. There were too many people. His formation couldn't stop too many people. It was already very difficult for him to do this. The old injury from his early days in seclusion on the mountains started to ache again. Lu Buang knew very well that he couldn't hold on for long. However, he still had to stop them here. The longer he stopped them here, the longer Cui Yueji's side could hold on. The more Yudo he killed here, the more time Cui Yueji's people could have. The people in Jiang City would be safer, and so would she. The peach blossom smiled sweetly out of the fence. It was the most affectionate of all. In his life, there was only one peach blossom that seemed to have bloomed. He couldn't see this peach blossom bloom to the end. It was good to take care of it a little longer. With a clang, the zither string in his hand seemed to be unable to bear it and suddenly broke. The zither sound stopped abruptly, and Lu Buwang spat out a mouthful of blood. The blood fell on the surface of the zither in front of him, and some splashed into the grass on the ground. It was like the peach blossoms in March, pretty and affectionate. Without the zither sound, the footsteps in the depths of the dense forest quickened and were right in front of him. Since the formation had been broken, he slowly stood up. Who is that? Who is it? Why is there only one person? Is there an ambush? After breaking the formation, the Yuto broke in. However, because of the ambush in the forest just now, he was afraid. Seeing that Lu Buwang was alone in front, he was afraid that there would still be an ambush around, so no one dared to come forward for a while. The two sides were in a stalemate for a moment. In the end, the Yuto was bolder because he had more people. After a while, he laughed and said, "It's just one person. Even if there is an ambush, there aren't many soldiers left in Jiang City. We'll kill as many ambushes as there are. What are you afraid of?" The man in white in front of him didn't move at all. His clothes were neat and tidy, like an immortal. In the past, his black hair was tied up with white silk, and he looked otherworldly and cold. Now, his hair was gradually turning gray, but his back view, which was as reassuring as a tree, had never changed. He would always protect the people he wanted to protect. A gentle breeze blew past, causing his hair tie to sway slightly, causing his robes to sway gently, and causing ripples to appear in the man's watery eyes. He was stunned at first, and then a smile slowly appeared on his lips. The chance of survival in this death game had come. The hope of Jiang City had come. The wind had come. Lu Buwang slowly pulled out the long sword at his waist. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.